Well, it says we're live. I think we're live.
Hey!
What's up, guys? How's everybody doing out there?
Hey!
Hey, election day.
Yes, dude. All right. Hey, if you guys can see us and hear us okay, just throw like a yes in the chat box. This is actually our first time ever going live on this channel and our first live We Talk Money show. So, yeah.
Yeah, this
Good to
is
be here.
cool.
This is fun.
Awesome. Yeah, man. Dude, a ton to talk about, obviously.
Big day.
Yeah, big day. Big
Market's
day.
moving.
Yeah, I mean, I think so what are we going to do for the flow of the show? I think we should start, with the markets and do some live market analysis.
Yeah.
Talk about, I don't know, what's happening today? There's some big
Some
event that's
big event,
happening
yeah.
that may or may not impact the markets.
Are you sure? I don't think anything big is happening.
Yeah, let's just pack it up.
today.
It's just another random Tuesday, you know.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, guys? All right, looks like audio and visual is good. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, what's up, everyone?
Michael said this is like having a halving party, like a Bitcoin halving party, but with more anxiety.
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong today, guys?
Oh, man.
Nothing. Everything's gonna work out perfectly fine, and
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be
Yeah.
great.
I think this is my 4th cup of coffee.
Yeah,
today.
Yeah, I'm
They're-
jacked up on caffeine and
There's definitely
adrenaline.
that pit in the stomach that
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just won't go away. But like everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully.
Oh yeah. Hey, what's up, BTC Kyle? Yeah, go ahead and smash the like button, guys. Let's wake up the YouTube algorithm.
Smash it.
Yes. Gotta get all our peeps in here.
Julian
Yeah, man.
says
Let them know,
volume,
wake them up.
Julian said volume is a bit low. Should we do another mic test?
Mic check,
You
mic
think
check.
this-
Clear but not loud. Interesting. Kev, is there anything we can do to bump up the audio a little bit?
Yeah, Alex says it's a bit low as well.
Ruh-roh.
Oh,
Okay,
we're maxed.
cool.
All right, well, getting what are getting. Well, so yeah, I guess turn up your speakers then.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sweet. So let's just jump right into it. I think,
Kieran, nice.
yeah, why don't we start by just looking at where the markets are right now? We'll talk about Bitcoin. We'll talk about the stock market, obviously. We'll jump in and talk about the different, I think we're going to put on our investor hats today. We're not going to pick a side. We're just going to make predictions based on the possible outcomes and basically talk about how we want to position our portfolios and where the opportunity is based on what all the possible outcomes are, right?
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. All right, Kev, we good? All right,
Cool.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and just jump in and take a look where we are right now. So as of right now on Bitcoin, we're holding up still in the mid 13K zone. Had a breakout a couple of weeks ago, and we've been just kind of slowly trekking higher. So really no major moves today. Stocks are actually up pretty big. We've got the S&P and pretty much all the indices up about 2%. Why do you think that is, Trav?
Yeah, I've seen some different opinions on Twitter about why they think that is. And looking at the sector breakdowns, I think it's pretty confusing. I don't think there's a clear signal of what the market is predicting here yet. You've got sectors like cannabis kind of mixed, whereas, if it was predicting Democrats to sweep, then you'd have cannabis up big, all the green energy up big, across the board. And it's kind of mixed. You do have defense stocks, looking at the Republican side, you have defense stocks up a little bit, but not a lot. You've got some of the stocks that would benefit from a Republican administration up a little bit, but it's kind of just tracking the market. So it's not clear to me, looking at different sectors, it's very mixed. So overall, I think it's just optimism generally. We had a big market correction last week and early this week. And I think it's kind of the market saying, okay, maybe we freaked out a little bit too much. And, we do see in the data that markets tend to perform well under any administration. So I think the idea that people were pushing the market down one way or the other because of some prediction about Democrats or Republicans winning is a little bit simplified and I think not correct. So yeah, I think stocks just generally right now showing a little bit more optimism than they were last week and early this week. So we'll see.
Cool. Yeah, to me, it doesn't really matter who wins. Bitcoin's going to go up. So that's all that matters. No,
Well, no, it's funny you say that though.
Well-
When I do looking at bond yields and other asset classes outside stocks, and commodities are up, bond yields are up, it's basically the reflation or inflation trade across markets. So stocks up, bonds up, or yields up, stocks up. That suggests to me that whatever the market is predicting here, it's predicting higher prices and probably more government spending and
Recovery.
recovery. So.
Yeah, gold and silver both green today. All stock indices green as of right now. Bitcoin's green. Altcoins are actually getting hammered pretty hard. You can see, let's just do kind of a gainers and losers list. You can see most alts are down. Augur was up like 15% it's down or only up 8% right now. But this is the prediction markets. Yeah, what else is going on? Let's see. We've got basically most equity sectors that are green. Energy is the only thing that's kind of slightly down.
Yeah.
Something interesting on the S&P today, you just had the chart up too, was that last week was kind of dark. People were thinking that, this might be it. This might be the big sell-off that everyone's been expecting. Lockdowns in Europe, across Europe.
Yeah.
Cases in the U.S. increasing. The big one, right? No stimulus. But what also could have happened here, if you actually look at the technicals of this, that 23% retracement in the ES is holding really, really well.
Yeah.
And it bounced right off of it. And the other thing is a lot of shorts probably started to really get heavy into the markets, thinking, okay, of course, election coming up, all these other things, very ominous environment.
Yeah.
So the market, of course, has to freak people out and give people a heart attack. So, we get a nice little bounce off of support today after everybody's probably thinking it's going to crash.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Seems like an anticipatory rally. I know, Trav, you went through and actually put together like a bunch of different scenarios on how this could play out and what these outcomes are.
Yeah.
But it seems to me as of like right now, kind of midday on Tuesday, there's just like a lot of hope, that things are going to work out and we're not going to have like a gridlocked election.
Yeah.
If you had to predict,
oh man,
which by the way, it looks like our audio's good. So
awesome.
I think we're better there.
I think our volume came back in.
Yeah. If you had to predict what this outcome is going to look like, do you have any strong opinion or is it just very unclear? What are you thinking?
It's still very unclear for me. I think the obvious bearish scenarios are really like the ones that create the most uncertainty. So I would say for me right now, that would be a deadlocked election. So a tie, essentially a 270, or a situation where it's not clear because a state like Pennsylvania is the swing state.
Yeah.
And their votes won't be fully counted for several days. Or third would be a situation where you have some sort of like, it's so close that there's some kind of, legal battle or some contested situation with that. So those are the scenarios that would be really uncertain and really scary for markets where we might gap down tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So right now, the market doesn't seem to be too concerned about that. But I think we saw that map earlier today that there are some tie scenarios out there that are plausible. So we don't know yet. But I would say the other one that could be a little bit weird that I showed there on the spreadsheet is the one where you'd have a Trump presidency with the Democrats actually taking over the Senate. So right now the Democrats control the House, but the Republicans have a slight majority in the Senate.
Yeah.
If the Democrats were to win some key Senate races today, but Trump somehow maintained the presidency, that's kind of unlikely that you get Trump still as president with the Democrats taking the key Senate races, but it could happen. And if that did happen, what you would probably see is potentially a resumption of the impeachment attempts by the Democrats now that they have the Senate and the House. That would be a pretty bearish scenario as well.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of my most bearish scenario of the more likely scenarios. You can see the 4 highest probability scenarios that I think are most likely. And again, that would be like either a Democratic sweep, either Republicans continue to hold presidency and Senate, and House retains, or the Democrats retain the House. That's pretty likely as well. Those scenarios, most of those are pretty neutral. And the one, again, that's the most bearish is the one where the Democrats take the Senate, but somehow Trump still maintains the presidency.
Interesting, man. This to me feels like, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but just most uncertain potential outcome. And I think it makes sense for us to kind of sit back and go, okay, no matter what our personal beliefs or desires are, like, what are the wise choices to make based on these possible outcomes, right? So obviously I'm heavy long Bitcoin. This is the heaviest long I've been since 2016 probably.
Yeah.
You know, obviously been building into that position. And again, I mean, I kind of joked about this when we started, but I do believe, like, no matter who wins, Bitcoin's going to win long term. And that's why I've been going heavy into this, is with all that uncertainty, that has been kind of a bull catalyst for Bitcoin. What do you guys, so on the stock side though, what do you guys see as potential plays for a Biden win versus a Trump win? Are there any ways that you guys are leaning? Any strong opinions there?
Well, for a Biden win, you know, renewable energy and EVs, you know, electric vehicles, big plays there, cannabis, those could rally under a Biden presidency. Obviously, like, they have to get, you know, the sweep to be able to get legislation through. But yeah, I think that particularly though, Travis and I were talking about this earlier, something that I'm interested in mostly is the EV charging play.
Yeah.
Right now that I think we both agree that it could do well in either scenario.
Was that like Switchback? SPE?
Yeah, like SPE. We've been talking about SPE for a while. It's very clear that all over the world they're trying to progress EV vehicles and ban ICE vehicles by 2030, 2040.
Yeah.
We're seeing in California that's happening. That's probably going to start to happen across multiple states. So I'm kind of focusing more on what can do well no matter what. And this is one of those things that I think can.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm trying not to make bets that depend on a specific person getting elected or
Exactly.
a specific political party being in power. I'm trying to find the like high risk reward bets. It's the same thing with you and the Bitcoin. You know, going heavy in Bitcoin, it's basically like, I'm still trying to focus on what stocks I think over the next 1 to 2 to 3 years are going to do really well no matter who's in power. Because I do think there's so much uncertainty short term. Trying to play that for a short term trade is pretty risky. Obviously, it can pay off if you find something really asymmetric. But you know, there's most of my investments I would characterize as things that I'm hoping can benefit no matter what. There are some trades I have on though that are interesting. Like for a Trump presidency, you know, the Fannie Mae preferreds I think are pretty interesting here. So pull up like FNMAT or FNMAS. So these are a little bit complicated. They're a special situation investment. This can be up 4x in the next 2 years, depending on what happens. But a Republican-controlled Congress, or at least partially controlled Congress, and then a Republican president is more likely to actually lead to the outcome that makes these worth about 3 to 4 times what they're currently trading at.
Yeah.
Now, the Trump administration was trying to push through a restructuring of Fannie Mae in their first term, but too many things happened, particularly COVID. Like the Fannie Mae recapitalization was supposed to really get kicked into gear this year, but because of COVID, it kind of got pushed back a little bit.
So for anybody that doesn't know what Fannie Mae is, maybe give like a quick overview of what this is and what the play is.
So the quick overview is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are pseudo-government controlled entities. They're massive, massive entities that used to be publicly traded where private investors actually own them, but they had government backing. And during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, the government was concerned about these entities going bankrupt due to the housing crisis and collapse of the housing markets in the short run. And so the government took them over, injected capital, took them over, took like almost all the ownership of these companies. And the private investors were left with a little bit of ownership stakes, but then the government started to like play dirty. Over the next 10 years, it became clear that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were actually well capitalized, or they became more capitalized as the mortgage market started to recover, and all the loans that they were guaranteeing didn't go bad as they thought they might in 2008. So these entities became profitable again. And instead of those profits getting paid out to shareholders, they got kicked back to the government. And there's a bunch of hedge funds that are challenging the legality of what was done in court and things like that. But regardless of what happens, these entities need to be restructured because they hold a ton of traditional mortgages. They insure a bunch of U.S. mortgages. In fact, many of the mortgages out there for your homeowners out in the U.S. And so what has to happen here is these things have to get recapitalized, taken out of government control, and put basically where they can stand up on their own feet. But in order for that to happen, the existing preferred and stockholders need to basically resolve the court cases and have some sort of way that they can put money into the new entities. And so to do that, they've got to restructure these entities. Sorry, that wasn't very simple. But
No, that's fine. I mean,
You did say it was complicated.
it's hard to explain that in a simple way, but basically, you're still long these? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you were buying these, a few years ago? Or
Yeah, a few years ago, kind of near today's levels, actually in the like $6 to $8 range for most of these preferreds that have a $25 par value.
Yeah.
So the thinking is that when these entities are restructured and recapitalized, that the preferred can be worth at least par, which would be about 3 to 4x from current prices.
Cool. And so another one that you guys have been getting in now that we have the charts up is SBE, so Switchback. This is the EV charging stations that
Yes.
you guys are super bullish on.
Very
This was
bullish.
a SPAC.
Very, very bullish.
SPAC attack.
We love this investment because we think that it benefits under Democrats or Republicans just because the penetration of electric vehicles is going to go up.
Yeah.
Look at Volkswagen, look at Ford, look at GM. They're all rolling out EV products now.
You mean Tesla's not the only company rolling out EVs?
Yeah, they were,
Say it ain't so.
credit to Tesla. They got this industry kickstarted and showed that it was possible.
Yep.
And now EVs are like the hot new thing. And so all the automakers are coming out with their models over the next 2 to 3 years.
But I'm still not buying an EV until we see more charging stations across.
Wait a minute.
nation.
Wait a minute. I have an order in for a Cybertruck. Yeah. Also, Neo's been kicking ass lately.
Yeah.
Look at this.
I don't want to talk about Neo.
When did you pass it up?
I brought Neo up in the community when it was at around
Single
$4.
digits.
Yeah.
It was like a technical breakout. Tesla was running. I was thinking, oh, maybe Neo could end up doing the same thing. I didn't make the move on it, and sure as hell, look what it did.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
bag.
The one that got away.
Yeah. Well, I guess this is your not to like twist the knife, but I guess this is like the second one that got you this year. The other was Peloton.
That I actually had in my hands. I
You were
had
in,
shares.
and then you closed it for a small profit.
I closed it right before the freaking pandemic started.
Wait, you couldn't have predicted that this
I
pandemic?
couldn't. I don't know. I guess I don't have those powers yet.
Keep working,
The
Nick. You got
spidey
it.
senses.
Yeah.
What else is moving today?
What is moving
Well,
today?
retail's moving
Everything.
today.
Value, yeah.
Value and retail actually getting some love today. That suggests to me that the market's saying, all right, like, we expect a robust consumer through the end of the year, kind of no matter what happens with the elections. And we were worried last week or the market was worried last week about the COVID case increases in Europe, and what if America has the same thing happen and we have to deal with shutdowns heading into the critical holiday spending season. I think that's still possible, but when I look at the map of the COVID case increases, we're not seeing it as much in the highest population states yet, at least, like Texas, California, Florida, New York. The numbers don't look great, but they look okay. They're not like spiking yet. And so that I think gives me a little bit of comfort heading into the end of the year. And potentially we still may get some stimulus on the federal level. I don't know if they'll be able to get the money out by the holiday time period.
Ugh.
But assuming we don't get shutdowns, I think, the numbers economically have looked okay. So I think we'll hopefully continue to recover through the end of the year.
I guess the silver lining is the divergence between the new case rises and then deaths staying super low, which is, fingers crossed, hopefully that stays true.
Yeah.
Why don't we jump in and talk a little bit about the election and probabilities and outcomes? It looks like the betting markets are still favoring Biden, and also 538. And, basically what I'm reading here is, what is it? Like 90% odds is what 538 was given Biden. Now last year, obviously the polls are wrong. I have a very difficult time. I don't think I've ever actually accurately predicted a presidential election. So I'm definitely not the one to listen to about this, but do you guys have a strong leaning, or what are you thinking?
Well, I don't have any crystal ball that's any better than what's out there right now. I will say that there's going to be some surprises tonight, no matter what. The reason that it's so hard to predict, by the way, is because of the U.S. Electoral College. one or two states swinging can change the whole game.
Yeah.
Especially with a state like, imagine like Texas. Texas is a state that's been Republican for the last like 30 years, but the voter turnout is up a lot. And Texas has been moving towards the middle over the last couple of elections. If you got a surprise in Texas and it flipped, Democrat, then the race would be over. The election would be over. Biden would definitely win. But that's still probably not super likely, but it is a possibility. And then look at the other, swing states that everybody believes are swing states, like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, Minnesota, Wisconsin. These states all hold somewhere between 10 and 20 electoral votes each. And you get 2 or 3 moving one way, and that changes the whole entire dynamic. So
yeah, I know we were playing around with this a little bit. This is basically showing how you can kind of swing the state from dark blue to dark red or somewhere in between. And there's actually a lot of cases where it's like even, right? And I think, Trav, you were showing me this earlier. There's so many scenarios, like 64 different combinations that could actually equal a tie. Now, I don't know what the probabilities of this are, but playing with these kind of key swing states, it is very damn close.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, I think it's fun to kind of play around with the scenarios on this site, 270towin.com, and you can click the states and change what you think might happen. But the key states tend to be states like, assuming something crazy doesn't happen, like Texas flipping, which I do think is actually a possibility. That's not too crazy, but putting that aside, I think playing with some of the states, you could actually have Trump win Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida, but still have Biden win if he takes states like Arizona, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, and Nevada. And so yeah, there's a lot of ways this thing can flip either way.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody really knows until later tonight, and maybe not even until later in the week.
Yeah.
And I think that things have been so polarizing lately, socially across so many different subject matters, that it's hard to even gauge where people are standing. There's just so much emotion and so many inflammatory responses, and it's just hard to say. There might be a lot of closet Trump supporters right now, for all we know, or closet Biden supporters that are maybe not like expressing how they're truly feeling. And
yeah, I know you were pulling up these articles, just talking about like the division amongst families and how this is actually really sad, right? The thing to me is like, what I don't want to see is Americans lose faith in democracy and the process. Granted, I've been really critical about this whole 2-party system for a long time, and I think it's kind of an illusion of choice. And I don't know, I would rather see ranked choice. I think that could fix a lot of issues. But yeah, I don't know. I hope we can stop hating each other so much. This year has just been weird, man.
I've been reading so many stories of people that have been either afraid to say who they're voting for, depending on who they're talking to in their circles of friends and family, or they do say and they end up losing friends and family over it. And to me, that's just a wild. Maybe that's been the case every election. I'm not sure. It just feels like it's more prominent in the news, these types of stories. I pulled up a few different stories. This one was really cool. So this was a story in the Wall Street Journal. 2 next door neighbors, I forgot where they live. I think they live in Pennsylvania. But basically they have opposing views, but they are, one of them signs got stolen out of the yard, and, stuff like that was going on. But what happened was they ended up wanting to show a little love to the community. So they each put up signs so they had the Trump sign in one yard, the Biden sign in one yard. And then they put up signs that say, "We love each other." Like, trying to say like, hey, we have opposite views, but we're 2 neighbors that really love each other still, even with the opposite views. And I was thinking, what could somebody possibly say negative about that?
Oh, I mean, people are going to hate on everything, right? I'm sure there's going to be people that even hear what we're saying and are going to find a reason to be pissed off, right?
Sure as shit. There were tons of negative comments. Like, people are just like, if you do not believe what I believe, you're dead to me.
Yeah.
And then there was another story about some kid basically disowning his mother for voting for, I forgot who she voted for, Trump or something. And yeah, she told her son she was voting for Trump, and the son was like, I'm done with you. You're no longer my mother, or,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. And then in that particular article, there was actually a quote that there was a report put out by the Pew Research Center, and they found that nearly 80% of Trump and Biden supporters said that they had few or no friends who supported the other candidate.
Yeah, see, that's a weird thing, right?
That's weird to
whenever
me.
people start living in their own bubble and that's all you hear, and it just reinforces that behavior, and you go into like this downward spiral of just confirmation bias, right? And I you know, fine, for the average person, if you want to do that, whatever. But if you want to be an investor, that's not smart. Like if you're just, it's the same thing we talk about with the markets. Like if you're just overly bullish or overly bearish, or you let your political beliefs like really hinder your investment decisions, you're probably not going to make the wisest decisions.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's one of the greatest gifts that the markets have given me, beyond any kind of financial gains or anything like that. The greatest gift that the market has given me in my career has been the ability to get feedback in real time about like my views and what's right and wrong from an investment perspective. You know, you can't hold beliefs and be dogmatic and then ignore your P&L.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could,
could,
but you know,
There are some people that will go down with the ship for sure.
And there's clear feedback. Now, I will say sometimes markets get distorted. You know, there's been frauds, for instance, that we were short at the hedge fund that took 2 years before they were busted for their fraud. And so they were going up in the meantime, and we were so frustrated. So the markets are not always right about everything. But what's great about it is you have to try to be objective. And if you hold these crazy dogmatic opinions and the market's telling you like, sorry, like the market's voting and you're wrong, well then if you're not assessing that and trying to figure out why you're wrong, then like you're not a great investor. And so like that I think is one of the best things about being involved in what we do is you can't be too like dogmatic, you know?
Yeah. I just don't think it's healthy to be taking people out of your life because of politics. And that's just my personal opinion. I think that, of course, you know, there are certain things that, and the argument is that, well, if you believe that, you know, I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to get into the political side of it, believe it or not. But if you don't believe this, you're a bad person. And I don't want to be friends with you if you don't believe this thing, because that means you're just horrible. Yeah. Right? And that's the argument. But it's like, in a world where everybody thinks the exact same, what does that look like? That's not really a world that I think that we should, for certain subject matters, yes. But at the same time, we have to like learn to love each other and live with each other. And like, just because you don't agree with something, let's like talk about it in a productive way where I can try to understand your point of view and you can try to understand mine. And at the end, if we agree to disagree, that's fine. But do we have to disown each other over this?
Yeah. You know, I see similar behavior in the crypto space where people get really tribal about a coin. They're like, this coin is the best coin, or this is the real Bitcoin, or, you know, Bitcoin's a scam, or the Fed is a scam and the stock market is going to go to zero, right? Yeah. It's like the more you can remove yourself from that argument and be like objective and step outside and say, well, what is the reality? Right? Like take the Bitcoin argument between like BTC, BSV, and Bitcoin Cash, right? If you just look at the facts and look at, you know, hashing power and, you know, what is the thing that is going to survive or have the best possibility and probability of survival, and you go down that path, that's where you actually retain your net worth. Yeah. Whenever you get dogmatic about it and you're like, I'm going to buy this bleeding, dying thing. Okay.
I mean, it's clear that Dentacoin is probably the best, right? Just kidding. No. Or what is it? Doge?
Doge. Yeah. Doge is the real Bitcoin.
No, I'm kidding. No, but yeah, I think, okay, like I kind of understand the sentiment, like, that people do want to stand for something. And so in the sense that like, if there's truly something that you think is core to your beliefs, like, I do think about like, if we were in like Nazi Germany, like we wouldn't just be sitting here being like, well, everybody just needs to get along and let's just be like, you know, all
Yeah.
friends and neutral on
Yeah.
everything, right? Like at some point with certain things, you have to take a stand. But I agree,
Yeah.
like when you have this in America, I don't think we're there. I don't think we're at some point where we're facing the collapse of America depending on like Biden versus Trump. I really don't. I know a lot of people believe that. I'm trying to objectively look at everything, and there's things that concern me about this country, but I don't think we're at a point where no matter who wins tonight, like I don't think we're going to have some massive societal collapse. I really don't. But people believe that, and a lot of people are taking the tack that that's where we're at, and
Yeah.
so
And I agree with you. Like there are obviously we have to have our values, and that we don't have to sway from our values if you know our parents don't agree with what we how we feel. But I guess I just feel like disowning family and friends over it. Like is it worth it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And only having friends that think the same exact way as you do, and just like forgetting about anybody. Like I know people that literally multiple people that have said to me, "Oh, if someone votes for Trump, if I have a friend that votes for Trump or Biden, you know, both goes both ways, I don't want to be friends with them anymore." And it's like that's kind of shitty to me. I don't
Yeah.
know.
People-
Maybe I'm just a lover and
yeah, people have you know, it's amazing because I think if you actually got down to it and had a real conversation, that most people in America would agree on like 80% of the issues, or maybe like even closer to 90%. Like, oh, should we make our healthcare system better? Yes.
yes.
And then you just argue about how, like the specifics of how you do that, right? Like
Yeah.
healthcare is too expensive. How do we make it less expensive? How do we make it more affordable? How do we fix income equality? I think everyone probably agrees that the middle class is a good thing. Like
Yep.
how do we make sure that the middle class is healthy? Like we all agree on
Yes,
these fundamental
that's
things.
the thing.
We've let these media outlets, whether it's, you know, name your favorite media outlet, right? Like we all know who the big ones are. We've let them make it us versus them. And like, I
Exactly.
don't watch cable network news at all. I
Yeah.
don't. I will try to read the publications that I think, like The Economist, or you know, at least parts of the Wall Street Journal, where I think it's more objective and I can actually get factual news. And then I just try to avoid the noise that is. And by the way, we have this in financial media too. CNBC. CNBC is a joke.
Yeah.
Like it is entertainment. It is not a place you go for like great financial advice, right? So it's like we've seen the same thing even in the financial news media. It's just like it's just junk food. And it just makes me sick that like even when we used to travel through the airports pre-COVID and they would have one or the other networks up on all the TVs in the waiting room, and I'm like putting on my headphones. I'm like, turn this garbage off. You're
Yes.
just blasting this garbage out to all of America and pitting us against one another.
And that's the
Like-
thing. Just like you said, we all probably want a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the way we're fed this information makes it like us versus them. And that's, I think, the problem.
Well, and that's marketing 101 is you tell your prospect, hey, whatever problem you're having, it's not your fault. And there's a common enemy, right?
Yeah.
You appease you basically placate them and appease to their fears, right? You twist the knife on the fears and then you say, like, it's not your fault. Here's the bad guy. Let me help you, right? And the media does that so well. I mean, they're fucking brilliant at
Yeah.
it on both sides, but if you can remove yourself from that and see things objectively, that's where you just make more money, and that's what camp I'm in. So
Yeah. Yeah.
do you guys want to jump into, Trav, do you want to go through your scenarios and look at in kind of detail like what the expectation of the different outcomes could be?
Sure, yeah. I'd love for y'all to jump in too. Don't let me monopolize this time. So let's just start at the top. So Democrats take both the presidency and the Senate. That's a reasonably high probability because what we're seeing in the polling and in the prediction markets right now still has the Democrats slightly favored. The Senate race is probably even harder than the presidency, to be honest, because the Democrats have to net gain 4 or 5 Senate seats, which is really hard because they're going to lose a seat in Alabama. Oddly, the Democrats have a seat in Alabama because it was a temporary seat that was gained when Roy Moore was ousted from his Senate seat. And we don't need to talk about that. But basically, Doug Jones was able to take over his seat. And Doug Jones will be probably taken out by Tommy Tuberville, the Republican who's running for that seat. So, long story short, Senate, for the Democrats to take the Senate back over and get a majority, they're going to need 4 to 5 seats of net gain. And that's going to be pretty tough. Now, there are some states where they can do that. There's some state races, even in places like North Carolina and Georgia, that are like running neck and neck. Even Texas has a Senate seat that is close, but probably still going to go to the Republicans. So it's possible, but you know, it's going to be a long road to get there tonight. But if it does happen, what would be interesting about that scenario is the Democrats would have control of the legislature and the presidency for the first time since the first Obama term, and that would allow them to really push forward a lot of new legislative packages. So you'd get green energy spending almost certainly. You know, we've seen Biden and a lot of the Democrats talk about the need to transition to clean energy. So you'd have probably a pretty big spending package there. You'd have big fiscal stimulus to help the consumer, I believe, during the COVID period. So that would probably be good for consumer and retail stocks. So I think green energy, they've also talked about, and Nikki mentioned this earlier, or essentially regulating and decriminalizing cannabis. We've already seen a push towards that in many states in the U.S., but that could become actually done on the federal level with a full Democrat sweep.
So do you think we could get out of this kind of bear market in marijuana stocks if there's a win? It looks like there's kind of some buying in anticipation of that.
Yeah.
Yep. I think it definitely could help the sector. You'd probably have an initial stock reaction that's really positive, and then the reality might set in that it's going to take probably a couple years for the transition to actually have the recreational and medicinal marijuana being sold in every state, right? So there might even, some of that might even be left to the states. So there might be states that decide they don't want to legalize it, but you know, it's just decriminalized at the federal level. So these cannabis stocks need a lot of supply to get sucked up by retail buying because there's still too much oversupply. So I think it could take a couple of quarters at least for the actual fundamentals to get there, but I think you'd see the stocks react ahead of the time. So I think you would see a nice pop in cannabis stocks. And there are some beaten up ones that I think are kind of interesting, starting to look pretty cheap.
Yeah.
And the states sure as hell could use the tax revenue.
Yeah. Yeah, good call. So, okay, so again, so if Democrats take a sweep, we've got consumer, cannabis, green energy that are buys. On the downside, so why would you put underweight under healthcare and biotech?
Well, there's just more uncertainty in those sectors. So you know that Democrats are going to try to take on drug pricing. You know that they're probably going to try to make the Affordable Care Act a broader. They want to offer more coverage to more Americans. So they're going to try to re-expand the Affordable Care Act. They're going to probably go after the health insurers for some things. Now, I think some of that will actually be really positive. I think it'll be really positive for the consumer because I know in my own life, like my health insurance premiums have been going up double digits every single year for the last decade. That just can't continue.
No.
That essentially takes over more and more of your budget. So we have got to get something done in healthcare in the U.S.
It's a huge problem.
Huge problem.
Especially as you get older, long-term care, things like that. Ooh.
Yeah.
You'll go broke at the end of your life trying to pay for healthcare later.
Yeah, I mean, it disgusts me that in America today, you can be successful and work really hard, and then you get sick and you go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Like, why the hell is that still a thing? Like, obviously, I don't have the answer to how to fix the system.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is definitely a problem that needs to be worked on.
Yeah. So I think their head and their heart is actually, at least their heart is in the right place, but it will create uncertainty for that sector, for the stocks and the companies in that sector initially. Because, you know, they're going to try to do something and it may come at the expense of some of the health insurers and things like that.
Yeah.
And we can argue about whether that's a good idea or not. I don't think anyone really knows all the details yet to be able to make that up. But I do think the uncertainty alone will weigh on the valuation multiples in healthcare and pharma sectors overall.
Yeah. Cool.
Agreed.
So that's the first scenario is Democrats sweep everything. You've got kind of a clear bifurcation between stuff that you would expect to do well and stuff that you'd want to underweight. In the second scenario, so Trav, you said this is your most bearish, where Trump wins and it's Democrats in the Senate and House. Also a higher probability. This is probably where things get ugly, right?
Yeah. And if I had to rank, so I actually just used the same I just put high probability for the first four of these scenarios. But if I were to like do it more granularly, this would probably be the least likely of the four high probability scenarios, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because it's really weird to envision how the Democrats could take key Senate races in some of the swing states, but not take the presidency. That would be a sort of a strange outcome. It is possible though, because the races are so the thin margin in both the Senate and in the Electoral College. It is possible, and it is relatively a decent probability. But yes, again, so the reason that I think this would be bearish, is because with the Democrats taking control of the Senate and Trump maintaining the presidency, the Democrats would almost certainly find a reason to go after Trump again for impeachment. And they weren't able to impeach Trump before because they didn't have control of the Senate. But if they do get control of the Senate, then the impeachment attempts could happen again. And that would just create a lot of uncertainty. Okay, how's this all going to play out? What happens if he is removed? There's going to be fights back and forth. Maybe stuff, just gets heated again with Americans pitted against one another, riots or protests, who knows? It's not a great scenario. You could imagine, though, if that happened, that later on in the term, potentially with the Democrats controlling the legislature, that they could get some of their agenda passed, which might benefit some of the sectors we just talked about in the first scenario.
Yeah.
Green energy, cannabis, etc. But you're going to have a lot of bad headline stuff for a while if that plays out that way.
So in the next kind of scenario 3 and 4, you've got basically Republicans in the Senate, Democrats have the House, and then either Biden or Trump.
Yeah, and those are pretty likely.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what we have now is the Republicans have a slight majority in the Senate, Democrats have the House, and I think it's very likely that combo itself stays in place if the Democrats don't pick up enough Senate seats. And then it's just a question of, okay, Biden versus Trump for the president's seat. And because you have the split legislature, that really impedes the ability to get things done from a legislative perspective. And so we're just kind of in that neutral gridlock between Republicans fighting Democrats in the legislature.
Yeah.
And in that case, I think it's pretty neutral. And again, you just have gridlock.
It seems, in my opinion, it seems like the most likely outcome is some kind of gridlock, just because Americans are good at not getting things done.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think about this? Like, to me, obviously, I mean, it matters who gets in office, but the bigger, I guess, short to medium term situation is the vaccine. Like, markets are absolutely hinging on that right now. And what do you think? I mean, is the vaccine more important? Is the presidency more important? Like, we really haven't factored this in yet, but what do you guys make of that?
I think that the market might be pricing in the fact that we may not get a vaccine as soon as we thought.
So it's pricing in the bear case right now, you think?
Well, that's just my personal opinion. I think the market's kind of like, okay, there's been this talk, we're going to see it by the end of the year. It's kind of been empty promises all year long about when the timeline is going to, what the timeline's going to look like for the vaccine.
Yeah.
I can see a case where the market is like, okay, all right, we may not get a vaccine till next year. We don't know when next year. But let's focus more on the death rate. Let's focus more on the therapeutics. Like, I can kind of see the market leaning that way. If the death rate is low, we may be able to find a way to continue to run the economy and function as societies. I don't know. That's kind of like, I guess that's my lens. I don't know what the market is thinking, so I'll take that back. But that's kind of my lens, how I'm seeing it.
Trav, what do you think?
Yeah, if you'd asked me 2 months ago, I would say, vaccine before the end of the year, at least an announcement of it, and then an initial rollout to the high-risk population and frontline healthcare workers. But now it looks more like a Q1 event, if anything, because they are being more cautious. We had a couple of the trials get paused because there was a death or two. And, Pfizer on their earnings call last week or week before, they kind of pumped the brakes on giving out data, and we're like, we're still, we're trying to do this in the correct way. We're trying to make sure everything's measured correctly. We don't have anything to report yet, and we'll try to get a report out when there's a better holistic look at everything. So it does sound like it could get pushed into either late this year, early next year. And I know people say, well, no one's going to take the vaccine when there is one. But I don't think that's true. I think the polling will show that, at least say 10 or 20 or 30% of people will take it. And that's enough to actually help flatten the curve. Because when you can stop transmission of the virus, when you can actually have healthcare workers out there not being afraid to treat patients because they have a vaccine, like all those things help on the margin. And if you add up all these little wins that we're getting, like reducing the death rate and getting more herd immunity and things like that will help us, I think, overall really, maybe not end this thing, but at least help flatten that curve and control it.
Yeah.
So I think it's good. I think it'll happen. I think it'll be at least like a Q1 event. And I'm relatively optimistic overall still.
Yeah. I think it'll come, but I think that the market is starting to realize it may not come as soon as we thought.
Yeah.
Or as we were promised, so to speak.
Yeah. Have you guys looked at the TSA numbers recently?
Yes.
I'm curious to know if those are still going up or if they started to come back down. So for anybody that doesn't know, the TSA numbers are, they basically measure like what are they net or gross numbers
Daily,
amount of travelers,
yep.
daily travelers,
daily passengers that pass through TSA checkpoints, which is basically the number of daily U.S. air travelers.
And so when COVID first hit in the spring, it went down to like 20% of normal levels. So like basically passengers were down like 80%, and then it started to creep up over the past couple of months. We were back at 35% levels.
It was actually down 95% in April.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. In late March and early April, it had gotten down to about 90. It was down 96% at one point.
Do you have that chart you can see?
Yeah, I'm actually, I need to paste in the most recent few days numbers. So I'm going to paste those in real quick and then I'll shoot this link over.
Cool.
Yeah. It looks like the numbers have been steadily increasing.
Yeah.
The numbers continue
I know that's
to
one thing we've
improve.
been looking at is, airlines and cruise lines and trying to figure that out.
Southwest announced on their earnings conference call the other day, last week, I believe, that they would actually start filling their middle seats. And anecdotally...
Oh, really?
Yeah. And anecdotally, I had some family members that traveled on a different airline yesterday from Seattle to Austin, and they said that the plane was nearly full. And I think we'll start to see a lot more of that because airlines have taken a lot of planes out of service. And, as passengers come back, the airlines are probably going to be slow to add capacity back. So you're going to have some pretty full planes again.
Yeah.
And that's, overall, I think good news for the airlines and their survival. But it's going to make some people pretty nervous with the virus still circulating out there.
Yeah.
Let me just.
Well, while we're doing this, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in chat.
Yeah, we should take some questions.
Yeah. What are you guys thinking? What markets are you looking at?
I did see some earlier, but
if we missed them in chat, feel free to just repost, guys.
All right. Paste these in.
I'll just pull Bitcoin back up. Let's check in on the markets. Doesn't look like we've really... I've got actually a delayed feed here on the futures, but as of right now, it doesn't look like there's any kind of crazy moves across anything so far. Gold's been kind of holding up. We hit a longer term profit target. So just taking a look at gold. So I've been accumulating over the past several years in the 1200s, had a pop up. We actually tagged the 61% extension up above 2000 a few months ago, and then have been kind of pulling back a little bit, but this has been an awesome trade. Gold result from the election. Thorne was asking. Yeah. I mean, look, gold's one of those things that I look at Bitcoin and gold as a winner no matter who gets elected. I mean, because, everybody knows the money printer's been going burr and sound money is going to win long term, right? I think, obviously it's kind of fun to focus on the election short term and talk about what could happen. But longer term, I think the trend is clear and sound money is going to win. And, I don't know. I will say Bitcoin is a much better option than gold in today's economy. It's better money. But I like gold.
Yeah,
I don't hate on gold. I like gold. It's pretty. It feels nice.
Yeah, it feels nice. It looks nice. Would you say that thinking about gold as an investment, it's more of a hedge against inflation versus trying to buy it for growth and appreciation, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where some people maybe go wrong, trying to buy it for major appreciation or size returns, so
yeah,
to speak.
yeah. Like, look, if there's hyperinflation or like, you know, I know there's a lot of YouTubers that just beat this narrative of like gold's going to 5,000 or 10,000 next week. It's like, okay, could it? Sure. Is it likely? Maybe 1% probability. I don't know, but I look at gold as just a better way. If I'm going to be liquid and hold cash, I either have Bitcoin or gold. And obviously some dollars, right? Like you want to be liquid, but I actually did a YouTube video talking about this. I don't speculate on gold. I don't actively trade it. I just accumulate, kind of like I accumulate Bitcoin when it's in the depths of a bear market. And I look to hold it because I know over time it's going to beat inflation. It's going to be better than stashing $1 million in cash under the mattress, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and you know, the other thing about gold is it can have those booms and then just do nothing for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like metals in general can do that. I think if you actually pull the gold chart up, how long did it kind of consolidate and hang around in that range?
yeah, I mean,
after
it was
the big
basically
boom?
from 2011. Where'd my gold chart go? There we go. Yeah, from like basically the highs of 2011,
Yeah, there it
we
is.
had a few years of a sell-off, then we stabilized, went into accumulation range, and we've really only been in a trending market since last summer. So this is a relatively new bull trend that we've
It was
entered here.
consolidating for a long time
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that 12 to 1400 range. So it could have years of not having movement.
Yeah. Oh, Maori asked a good question. Are there any bearish scenarios for Bitcoin and gold? Of course not. They're only going to go. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I mean, the bearish, I've actually been thinking a lot about this with all the digital, central bank digital currencies. We've talked about this over the past several weeks about my opinion is they're bullshit. Like central bank digital currencies are not real, borderless, permissionless, fairly distributed cryptos. They are just basically like OneCoin or BitConnect. They're Ponzi schemes that are built on the back of an existing fiat system, right? There is no transparency. There is no real limited supply. They can make as many of their dollar coins as they want, or, you know, won coins or whatever. But in the short term, we are going into this battle phase where first, you know, 10 years ago, governments and Wall Street investors were laughing at Bitcoin. And then now we're in the fight you phase, you know, that now governments are stepping up going, oh my God, this stuff is not only is it real, but it's actually threatening the fabric of our monetary system, the way that we've known it for not, I mean, look, fiat currencies only last, you know, half a century or whatever on average. And the dollar is actually kind of old. You know, when you look at it, it's kind of an old fiat. And, I don't know, with the IMF recently coming out saying we need a new Bretton Woods and we need a reset. Like my prediction is something big is going to happen on that front within the next year or two. And that could have kind of a short-term effect on Bitcoin. But again, I'm just staying focused on the prize, which is long-term Bitcoin wins, I think, over digital, central bank digital currencies.
Yeah, I've said before, I think on this show a couple of episodes ago, that I don't have a whole lot of faith in governments to actually do something technologically complex. I don't have a whole lot of faith in them executing that well. Yeah. So the idea that I should take that back. The Chinese government can get it done.
Yeah.
Because they can essentially, you know, force their way into getting it done. But governments like the U.S. government tend to be very ineffectual at actually carrying out very complicated, hard technological tasks like that. And so I'm kind of skeptical on their ability to get it done and for it to be a smooth rollout and to actually be executed well, especially because a lot of Americans would probably put up a fight against it.
Yeah.
And for that reason alone, I think Bitcoin and other digital currencies probably here to stay for a long, long time.
Yeah. Well, in the most recent white paper that came out, where they were basically giving the use cases of what the central bank digital dollar could do, I'm like, Bitcoin does that better. Bitcoin does that better. Bitcoin does that better. And then there was one use case where I'm like, oh yeah, that actually might be a value add. It was, I forget what
was it? You don't
I forget what
remember?
it even was. It was something to do with, I'll pull it up later, but yeah, it was basically like, okay, so you're basically trying to reinvent Bitcoin, but it's centralized and oh shit. Okay. This is all about control, right?
Yeah.
So
There is, so the initial question about bearish scenarios for Bitcoin, there is a common scenario out there that I think has some decent probability, which is the deflation before inflation scenario. And a lot of people have been talking about this year. Macro investors have talked about this, and it's the idea that you're forced essentially into it's sort of like what we saw in the spring with the COVID crisis. Something happens, the economy goes down, you have deflation, the consumer's really hurting, you start to get into deflationary spiral. Fiscal governments say we need spending to offset this and get the economy moving again. And they, if they overdo it, then you have a potential situation then to get inflation. So you get deflation first, which can hurt assets even like Bitcoin, and then inflation
react.
later. And right now you could make the case, you've got virus shutdowns in Europe. If something like that were to happen in the US as well, you could see a second leg down in the economy. And that would then make the case for that deflation first before you get the fiscal response.
Yep.
Especially because we do have these elections that are uncertain and there won't be a transition of power until January. Maybe if fiscal stimulus doesn't get done until next year, then you could have that deflation first for a couple months and then big inflation later. I also like to think we've talked about the UBI experiment or the MMT experiment.
Yeah.
Where governments increasingly start to realize that they can use fiscal spending because there hasn't been inflation from running these big deficits yet. And they're like, well, why not? If we can borrow at less than 1% or at negative rates, why shouldn't we spend a shitload of money?
It works until it doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they
and then when it doesn't, it's too late. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, that experiment failed.
Yeah, it's like how much of a deficit until it all comes crashing down, right? Like that's what we don't know.
Yeah.
And are we willing to test the waters there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
That's a good question.
So one question I did see here that I thought was interesting that I'd be interested to hear your opinion on is what altcoins you think are the most viable. Actually, two questions here. I saw one that was what altcoins, if any, are viable, and then the second one is will we see another altcoin season?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'll preface this by saying I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. However, I do think Bitcoin is obviously the Mac Daddy right now. It has its own issues. And before people start shilling their favorite altcoins, let me just get through this because I know people are going to start doing that. I think currency competition is great. I'm not in the camp of like, oh, all altcoins are scams. Like I know some people that I actually respect that say that, and we agree to disagree on that fact. I think that competition in this space only makes it more anti-fragile and better over time. And so I was actually really bearish on Ethereum after the 2017 ICO bubble, just on the price. I mean, if we look at the price, if we go back, we'll kind of zoom out here. I've got a bunch of drawing charts on here, but I was actually really bearish on Ethereum because it had so many bag holders from this big boom and bust. And with the new wave of DeFi and all, the DEXs and all that, that's given kind of new life. So I've actually started to accumulate Ethereum again for the first time since the early days. I was lucky to get in on Ethereum at $1, in between $1 and $2, and then we traded it on the way up. And
Dude, it was crazy, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, we thought we were geniuses when we traded from $1 to $15, and then little did we know this thing was going to go to where it did.
That was like every crypto.
Yeah.
Every crypto went way longer than people thought.
Yeah.
I'm such an idiot. I had I went back. I have emails from some crypto angel groups that I was part of back in 2012, 2013, I think. And there were emails about an opportunity to invest in Ethereum before it went like public, and I didn't do it. And it was like, God, if I just paid closer attention to that, like one potential angel investment, I could have been up like 1,000x.
What it could have, should have.
It was so new, and I mean, no one really understood it very well.
Right,
back
and
then.
that's, dude, that is why we do what we do. Right, is like you don't have to catch them all.
Right,
you just. All it takes is one to make life-changing amounts of money.
True.
And there's always another trade. There's something else coming right now, right? There's things that are going to be here this year, next 5 years, next 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's just that game of constantly hunting and being prepared and showing up that matters.
Yeah.
And I mean, having the balls to place your bets when the time is right, right? Like,
Yeah.
You know what, though, too? I think that we're in this new environment, especially with like DeFi coming onto the scene and just crypto becoming more mainstream. It's almost like and I can't believe I'm going to say this, like from a financial planning perspective, I'd probably get chastised in the community. But
Good. Screw them. You're ahead of all that. Anyway.
it's almost like with stuff that's it's still new, right? Like even Ethereum is still new.
Oh, yeah.
And people that they don't fully understand it, but they see that it's, emerging. Take you don't have to go all in on this stuff. You can have like a portion of your portfolio where you can just put in a small position.
Yeah.
Like I know people that are interested in investing in Bitcoin, but they're like so afraid to invest in Bitcoin. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a huge part of your net worth.
Well, and isn't that becoming more acceptable in the financial planner communities?
Just starting to.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of those people, and no offense, by the way, to any other CFPs or CFAs watching this, like you guys were taught this is the way that markets work. But guess what? Markets throw people for a spin. Nobody thought 20 years ago, nobody thought we'd be in a negative interest rate environment today, or that there would be a decentralized digital currency challenging the fabric of the global financial system, right? Like that's why the future is uncertain and what makes this so interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point about, financial planners just ignoring it, like the risk to reward, in my opinion, is asymmetric. Could all this shit fail and go to zero? Sure. Is it likely? No. So based on that and looking where all the other asset classes are and with yield so low, where are you going to put your money? Well, probably in fast growing places where there's a lot of brain capital working on solving
issues.
The bloat of the financial services industry, right? What financial services is 4 to 5% of GDP, something like that. Like that is a tremendous amount of money that can get arbitraged away with these crypto projects. And that's why I always tell like the Bitcoin maximalist guys, I'm like, don't shit on the DeFi stuff too hard. Yes, most of it's a scam. A lot of people are going to lose money, but like these are experiments that are ultimately going to be the fabric of the future financial system. So
yeah, the cream will rise to the top, just like it did with, ICOs. Everyone was hot on ICOs for a long time, right? And finally it was realized that those were not the safest place to put your money. And then they went, how many of them went away? Like
most all of them. And that's why, from the very beginning, we've been saying like, look, this stuff is super high risk. You don't have to put your entire net worth into it. Diversify and just don't chase the hypey stuff. Like there's a reason why we didn't chase into this yield farming craze. Like, yes, a handful of people made a ton of money, but most people lost money. And as of today, actually, I think even right now, like a lot of the yield farming stuff and the DeFi projects are actually getting hammered really, really hard, which I'm actually kind of excited for because, I really like when markets go to pre-bubble levels. That's where I like to accumulate. So my attitude is like, I don't have to be first to the party. I can like watch everybody go crazy and throw their money at these projects, let some things implode. And then I sit back and go, okay, what's going to survive? And after all the get rich quick people have been blasted out, where can I accumulate at really attractive prices where I have that asymmetric reward to risk? And that's when I step in.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell that tangent was. I just went off on it.
No, I mean, I love it. What I'm kind of interested in on the crypto side is ETH 2.0, like the scaling, like layer 2 scaling solutions for Ethereum. I've been kind of like geeking out on that a little bit and reading into it a bit more.
Yeah.
Obviously that sort of goes hand in hand with some of the DeFi stuff, but all the initial promise of Ethereum, smart contracts and, the ability to put assets on the blockchain and things like that. A lot of that I think does hinge on what happens with ETH and some other competitors as well, as far as getting their scalability to improve.
Yeah.
And the ETH 2.0, I wasn't sure in, BTC Lightning, ETH 2.0, all that stuff, Plasma. It seemed like maybe it would just be pie in the sky, but there's starting to be some signs that there's some legit breakthroughs happening there. And I think like that's something that's been flying under the radar and that I'm kind of geeking out on right now to see if I can understand it better.
Yeah.
If they can get that done and then we start to like slowly see the snowball roll down the hill with like smart contracts and STOs and stuff like that, like that's going to be massive as well. Like,
yeah, in my opinion, that is inevitable. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like, meaning all assets are gonna be tokenized. something else that was really cool this week that happened, the SEC just made a bunch of changes to Reg D, Reg CF, and Reg A filings. So that's just another step in the right direction. Basically what they did is, it's my understanding, they took the regulation crowdfunding from a maximum of 1 million to 5 million. So a lot of these smaller startups are actually going to be able to advertise and raise from non-accredited investors and get a bigger amount of capital. I think that's dope.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the, like we've seen in the angel space, it's like a lot of the higher quality projects have been Reg D, because that's kind of the middle ground, right? You got Reg A, which is really, really hard and extremely restrictive. And then you got Reg D, which is easier, but you can only raise from accredited investors. And then Reg A for the past several years has been kind of a joke, because good projects are not going to, their first option is not going to be to raise from non-accrediteds with $1 million cap.
Yeah.
Right. Like that. It's only the project flow that I've seen in the Reg CF space has just been shit. But I hope that this changes that. I hope we're going to see higher quality projects go Reg CF.
Yeah. Hell yeah. You know, I've been really critical of the SEC because they've been like asleep at the wheel with regulation and cracking down on frauds over the past few years. But the one thing that they have done well is started to finally get off their ass and push forward with changes to crowdfunding, with changes to changing the accredited investor rules and things like that we've talked about.
Yeah.
So please get them, you know, I hope they can continue to move that ball forward, because it's been needed for many years.
Yep, absolutely. Man, we've got a lot of questions here. We should do kind of like a fire round.
Yes, fire round.
Is real estate going to be bullish next year? Look, I know it's popular. All these YouTubers are out like clickbaity, like, oh, the end of the real estate market, the crash is imminent. What do you guys make of that?
Crash is that's what they're all saying?
Yeah, all the big YouTubers
Oh
are
my
like
gosh,
kind of
I
copying
don't
each other.
see that.
Like, oh, real estate is going to crash.
think-
Well, if they're talking urban real estate or like commercial
Well-
real estate, those sectors, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, like big,
Yeah.
like big cities. That I mean, yeah, there's an obvious flee to the suburbs right now.
Right.
Home builders are doing well. I think all of pretty much the numbers across the board were pretty well.
Very
across
strong.
real estate. I think that we're going to see the market just kind of stay steady over the next few years. I think that what could also happen is, as the virus kind of becomes something of the past, people might want to come back to the city too.
Yeah,
you know?
the pendulum's going to
The
swing
pendulum's-
eventually.
Yeah, it could very well do so. And then there could be like this bear market in cities that could lead to buying because there's deals.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I see more of a steady pace across real estate, the market kind of holding up. The Fed has been very clear that they're keeping rates low for a long time, I think through 2023 at least. So that's really going to help the real estate market, in my opinion. I don't know. I don't see a case for a crash.
Yeah, I don't either. I think maybe in certain sectors of commercial real estate, there's going to be distress. We're already seeing like a couple of the really low quality mall real estate
Yeah.
investment trusts that have had restructurings or bankruptcies.
Yeah.
Then, you know, cities like SF, where you're seeing clear flight out, the population loss, and you're seeing, you know, that was a market that was already going parabolic in terms of prices.
What a weird set of circumstances, right? Like
Yeah.
a 7 mile by 7 mile like area,
Yeah.
right? Where you can't build up. You've got everybody saying like no more building.
Yeah.
So super limited supply.
Yep.
Got the wealth effect of Silicon Valley.
Yep.
And that just created the weirdest situation. And then
Yeah.
like basically it's a free for all on the streets. Like
Yeah.
the last time I went to San Francisco, I'm like, I'm never coming back here until they fix this shit.
Yeah.
Seeing zombies covered in blood. Like literally I saw a guy covered in blood. You know, just, I'm like, does anybody see what's happening? And nobody seemed to care. They're like, oh yeah, this
Yeah.
is normal for San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not, yeah, I mean, they've lost a lot of, like, you know, there's been headlines the past week about more Walgreens stores closing there because they can't stop theft. You know, a lot of businesses have to hire private security guards. I do think some of that is a little bit dramatized. If you actually go and spend a good amount of time in San Francisco, even today, it's very different neighborhood by neighborhood. But the problem is a lot of the problem areas like the Tenderloin and Soma have started to push into other more residential areas. And so you are seeing this creep of the really bad problems that you're talking about, the rampant drug use, the theft, the break-ins. It's starting to expand more and more to the other residential places in SF. And you layer on the fact that they've got a DA there who doesn't want to seem to prosecute crime. Oh boy. Yeah. You've got a really bad set of circumstances.
And they're trying to increase state taxes again.
Yep.
So it's kind of a,
it's a
so
bad
maybe that's
set of
why like
circumstances.
most entrepreneurs we know there are coming here.
They're leaving.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, how's Austin?
Yeah.
So many people that we know in the internet marketing industry and all over are coming here.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, commercial real estate is probably the biggest concern at this point. Yeah. But if we're talking about the suburbs and we're talking about residential real estate,
I'm not worried.
Yeah, and I think the cities will. I don't think it'll be a ghost town forever.
Yeah. No, and I think cities like New York will probably be fine once the COVID crisis is over, and certainly the mid-tier cities like, you know, Austin, Dallas, Tampa, you know, cities that were growing, Atlanta, where else? Denver, Charlotte, you know, those kinds of places seem to be pretty healthy still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was looking for a mountain home over the past couple of months, and I'm like, where's the inventory? Mm-hmm. Like, there's just nothing available.
Still at record lows. I have to look.
Yeah, it's probably going to stay that way. You know, people just weren't putting their houses on the market, and the ones that were going like that, drove prices up. I'm like, all right, I'm not chasing this.
You know what's funny about this in the community? I remember when the market was selling off, there were people that were like, this is it. We're going to see the big real estate crash. We're going to be able to pick up properties for cheap. And like, nope, that didn't happen at all. It's just funny how in certain moments of panic, you can think one thing is going to happen. Then this whole crisis has just gone the complete opposite of what many people thought on many levels, not just real estate, but also like consumers saving more money and, you know, the money basically having more dry powder on the sidelines to spend money when the recovery eventually does come, you know, things
well, even
like that.
in March, you know, a lot of people were calling for the end, you know, this is it. This is the big one. And you guys were like, nope, we're buying these lows and got some phenomenal returns this year on stocks.
And if we see a big sell-off again in the market, I'm going to do the same damn thing. You know, like,
awesome.
I don't think that it's the end of the world for real estate or for the markets right now, even with this election.
Yeah.
Massive market crashes in most traditional asset classes like stocks, real estate, bonds are very rare. Even though you have gurus every week calling for that, they're actually quite rare. Mm-hmm. You know, 2008, 2009 financial crisis with the real estate, you know, what was, I guess you could consider a crash in residential real estate in certain areas, was a very unique event with a unique set of circumstances.
Yeah.
Those markets don't tend to see massive crashes very often. And so
here's a good question.
I always like to remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always good to like look at the past data and say like, you know, it kind of gives you a framework to start from, but also knowing like black swans can happen, right? Like things can change quickly.
True.
We know now.
Yeah. COVID was
2020 was plenty black swan for us. We should be black swan for a long time. We should be good, right? Like, we did our time.
No more.
But even then, like the stock market was more resilient than a lot of people thought.
Oh yeah. Well, that's because of the Fed, Travis.
Okay, so now that we're kind of talking about some plays here, this is a good question. How does your asset allocation look during this election and the economy cycle with like Bitcoin Gold, USA stocks, China emerging, cash, bonds? Yeah, maybe we can do like a little overview of like where we are positioned right now.
Sure. You want to start?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, I only own Bitcoin. No, I actually updated these numbers the other day. So I'm about a third crypto, a third stocks, and a third, I'm going to kind of combine, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. So a third crypto, a third stocks, and of the remaining third, that's split between like angel, private equity, gold, cash, and all the random stuff. But, yeah, I mean, I still have a big like equity exposure.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's more equities than I would have guessed for you.
Yeah. Well,
in your
that's
overall
including
portfolio.
a lot of like passive stuff.
Oh yes, okay.
So including all the passive because
Yeah, you don't pick stocks a lot, do you?
no.
Okay.
I mean, I let Nikki
That's
do
my
that.
job.
Yeah.
Well, she's the master.
I handle all the equities over
Yeah, I let
there.
you guys do that hard work. Yeah, what do you guys, how are
Well,
you
we're-
positioned? Well, so our portfolios are obviously the same, but of your, let's drill down to your active stock stuff. How are you positioned right now?
Domestic equities heavily.
Yeah.
I have been thinking about transferring some dough into more emerging markets, a little bit more emerging markets. I don't really have a lot of exposure there. You know, with domestic equities, I do get a lot of international exposure because a lot of my companies that I own do business, you know, around the world. And then I do have some passive investing ETFs that do have, you know, a little bit of China or some of the, you know, big companies that are in Europe, you know, Nestle, things like that are not US companies, but still high quality companies internationally. So I kind of have a mix of that in there too, but definitely heavily domestic.
Yeah.
I guess I have, what do they call it? Country bias?
Yeah, well, and so that's interesting though, because Trav's talked about this with the U.S. home country bias. We actually do have a lot of companies that generate revenue from overseas, so I
Right.
guess that kind of
Yeah, I
levels
mean,
that
even
out.
like a stock like Abercrombie and Fitch that I own, right? Like, don't make fun of me, people, for owning Abercrombie and Fitch. You don't know the story, but basically, they do business all over. Lululemon, they do business in China. They have stores everywhere.
Yeah.
So when I'm buying domestic equities, I'm looking at where they get exposure to around the globe too, if that makes sense.
yeah. Trav.
I mean, I'm a stocks guy. Stonks all the way to the moon. Actually, you know, about 10% of my assets are in crypto, mostly Bitcoin. And then, yeah, 90%, the rest of it's stocks. Although in my active stock portfolio, I'm about between 15 and 20% cash. And I also have some hedges on that I've had on for the last, like 6 months. So, yeah, I'm running like a hedged equity book, but yeah, that's, I don't know. It's not.
But, I mean, you invest in international stocks.
Yeah, and
too.
actually, I think that's a really interesting area to mine for opportunity right now, specifically in Europe, because of the COVID second wave there. You know, the equity markets in Europe never recovered quite as much as the US, and now they're down again significantly because of the second wave of COVID. So I think there's some probably really interesting bargains. The UK market also has been beaten up over the last couple of years because of uncertainty over Brexit and what's happening with the political situation there. So I think there's some really interesting values in some of the European markets that are worth diving deeper into.
Good caveat. Samuel was asking, is it true that anybody can trade American stocks regardless of what country they're from?
Generally,
Yeah, I think you have to check with your broker
yeah.
in your country.
What are the good international brokers?
It depends by country, but you know there are certain brokers like Interactive Brokers that actually you can get an account in many different countries. So I know we have quite a few European and Australian investors in our private investor community at Scale Incubator, and they are actually able to open Interactive Brokers accounts. And so that is one of those platforms that's more international. There actually aren't that many international brokers because most countries have their own. Like in Australia, you have brokers like ComSec. In the US, you have brokers like E-Trade and Fidelity, which are mostly US or North American based. Europe does have DEGIRO, which is one that covers quite a few countries across Europe. And so there are some pan-European brokers like that. Who am I forgetting? Asia is a whole different set of brokers generally. Although Hong Kong, I know you can open an Interactive Brokers account there. Singapore, I believe you can get an Interactive Brokers account. So
IB is probably the most well-known.
probably the most
Yeah.
internationally
and
broad.
DEGIRO is pretty popular
And DEGIRO,
too.
like I said,
Yeah.
in Europe.
There's one more, but I can't think of it.
Yeah, I know I'm probably leaving. I mean, TD is, you know, they got pretty good North American coverage, but they don't do a lot of like international equity stuff. Yeah, who are we forgetting?
Is it a broker in Germany?
What's that?
I thought it was a broker in Germany.
Oh,
but
like Saxo or someone like that, or
I can't. I can't remember the name of it, but
Yeah, South
Yeah.
America is I actually don't know the broker said as well in South America, but Douglas said Avenue and TD Ameritrade, and yeah, I'll have to
Cool.
check on South American.
but you should
brokers.
be able to get access to American stocks via certain brokers across the world. It depends on the broker, but
But yeah, the American markets are pretty open to
Yeah.
most countries and most investors.
except things like mutual funds, and I think there's kind of
Yeah.
certain restrictions with that.
Do you guys know off the top of your head what percentage U.S. stocks make up of the global cap? Is it like 50%? Am I correct with that?
Of the total, like,
So,
of all
like
stock
total
markets,
global
Total
market,
market
cap?
I
cap?
just saw a visual with this, and it's very high.
I actually
Is
should
it over 50%? Maybe it is.
I should know that number, but I don't. That's a great question. I would guess it's probably pushing somewhere between 40 and 50% of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
global market, public stock market cap.
So, Trav, I'm going to ask you a question that a lot of people ask.
Yeah.
This is from Board Again. What's your opinion on a 0% interest policy plus printing money, and how likely is it for governments worldwide to not be able to stop possible big inflation in the coming years?
All right, so some interesting components to that question. So
Yeah.
the first part of that was, what do we think about the 0% interest rate regime?
Plus the basically the printing
Money
of
printed
money,
over.
and then how likely is it that they're not going to be able to stop and inflation's going to kick in? Because that is the biggest fear. That's the narrative.
Yeah.
Money printer go burr, right? So
Yeah. Well, I think this goes back to, like, look at the data. Like 0% interest rates, everybody freaked out after the financial crisis when governments lowered interest rates and started to do more QE and things like that, expecting hyperinflation. I was looking at the data and was saying, no, it doesn't look likely, because the velocity of money declined. The wealth disparity increased. So you had, people gaining at the top, but the middle and lower class weren't gaining income. So they were falling further and further behind. That hurts the economy generally. It really creates sort of a deflationary impact on parts of the economy. Then you have other deflationary impacts, like global trade and the impacts of technology and things like that. So it's a really multivariate. Trying to figure out if there's inflation, deflation is a much more complicated thing than most people make it out to be.
yeah.
I'm of the mind that 0% interest rates, structurally, probably not going to hold long term, but I think for now is fine. Like, if the governments can borrow at 0%, and there's not significant inflation, then they should take advantage of that until there is significant inflation, and then the Fed can make adjustments. So if the market is telling governments go out there and do fiscal, then go do fiscal, because the monetary policies obviously have a limit. That's the thing that I think a lot of people forgot too, was that, just because the Fed lowers interest rates and it helps asset prices a little bit, it doesn't necessarily translate to direct impact on the consumer and the broad economy. That's where fiscal really comes in, and I think actually fiscal should get more attention.
More important,
Yeah.
I think.
Imagine, dropping the helicopter drops and putting money
Yeah.
in people's pocket. If you do that, velocity of money will go up. People will spend it. We've seen during the COVID period, people will spend the damn money, or at least pay down debt, if you give it to them. So give it to the middle class. Don't give it to the wealthy. Don't give it to asset owners like
Credit card
us.
debt went down.
Yeah. And I think that's where the biggest point of contention is, right? Is like, right now we have, I'm going to call it the K-shaped recovery, right?
Right,
Some
yeah.
people would agree or disagree, whatever. But the reality is people that held assets like stocks benefited from all this money printing, where people that do not have assets, like, what was it, 45% of Americans don't own stocks. They're screwed. They get left behind.
Yeah.
Right. So I can see where a lot of people get pissed off about this.
Yeah.
And then, like, over here in the Bitcoin community, people are going, well, that's not sound money. That's bad. And I agree with that. I think that is long term. It just devalues the dollar even more. But maybe in the short term, it props things up. What do you say to that?
So I think that, there's a slippery slope here, and we haven't seen where that begins, because we've been going lower and lower interest rates, and it hasn't really stimulated inflation on a broad scale, because that money hasn't been going to the middle and lower class where it needs to go to really increase velocity of money. But there is a problem at some point. Let's say the U.S. government came out tomorrow and said, we're going to make everybody millionaires. We're going to put $1 million in all your bank accounts, or, we're going to mail you checks for $1 million, every single person in the U.S., and we're just going to print it. Well, guess what happens? You're going to get inflation, and the money supply is going to be very, very debased, and you're going to have weird, perverse things that happen. But when the U.S. government comes out, and so that's the obvious, like, if you take it to the extreme, it's very clear what happens with a really unsound monetary policy, right? It's very clear what happens. But we're a long way from that. Even when they gave $1,000 checks during the crisis, we were just offsetting what was a severe economic decline. And so you can see this economy had a major GDP decline. It did recover, but it hasn't recovered even back to the level it was at pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So,
Still negative year over year.
So the tricky thing is threading the needle, and I'm not confident governments are going to be able to do that long term, and that's why I own crypto, as you do, I think, too, which is at some point they're going to figure out, okay, the market's letting us borrow at 0% or negative rates. Let's spend a little more. Let's spend a little more. Okay, let's do a $5 trillion spending package. Let's cut tax rates for middle class. And I think they should try that. The markets are telling them, go do that. Please go do that. Help this economy. Go do it. But then we're going to have to seriously look at that and go, can we have restraint?
I think the answer to that question is no.
And I probably agree.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when, like, think about this election, right? Like, it's so political. What is Team Red? What is Team Blue going to give me? That's the mindset of your average person, right?
Yeah.
People are addicted to this now.
Yeah.
And governments and politicians are addicted to cheap money. And that only ends one way, in my opinion.
I agree. But you and I, or not you and I, all of us could sit down at a table. You, me, Nikki, or CFP, we could all sit down at a table and probably figure out a reasonable way to, like, thread the needle. Maybe not. Maybe we would mess it up a little
I don't
bit.
have confidence in myself to figure that shit out.
I'd give it a go.
Okay,
but
you fix the
I'll
problem.
give it a go.
But, like, I mean, I do think we need to try something to try to fix the wealth inequality. And if we're going to be doing stimulus, can we try to at least target it to people that need it, who need to pay their bills, pay down debt,
That's what I think.
help people that are unemployed?
I think that's what the key here is, to avoid things like what you're talking about, runaway inflation and all the fear around all the money printing, is making sure that it goes to the people that need it the most to kind of even shit out. Because right now, things are so whack. Like, we've got families that got dropped thousands of dollars that didn't actually need it. Mm-hmm. They either saved it, paid down debt. I mean, revolving credit card debt is down.
YOLO Robinhood options.
Yeah, they're YOLOing options, whatever. Like, I think that to really round this out and for us to do this in a healthy way is to get the money to the people that are unemployed, that have lost their jobs. They're in the service industry. They're in hospitality. Those jobs have not come back. They don't look like they're coming back anytime soon.
Yeah.
That's what we need. Even things like the airlines, right? Like, we need airlines to survive for all of our sanities, because we're all going to need to get on a damn plane, and we're going to need to go somewhere on vacation when this is all said and done. But, industries that need the help. This was to no fault of their own that all of this happened. I don't think we should just be dropping money in the hands of people that don't really need it.
But then how do you do that, right? That's the $1 trillion question.
That's why the unemployment benefits were actually the way that it all worked out. It worked out really well, because the people that were filing for unemployment, obviously they had to show that they lost their jobs. Sure, was there maybe some fraud in there? Maybe, possibly, probably. But those people were able to get those bonus checks, and they were able to get their debts paid down, and they were able to maybe save some money and potentially make more money than what they were making in the everyday, in their everyday job before this happened. So I don't know. That's my take. Maybe it's a bad take, but I think that that's important.
You know what I have a problem with the sound money approach, even though I think conceptually it rests on a good foundation in the sense that like they're trying to make sure that a money supply doesn't get debased over time because of the slippery slope and, you know, the Weimar Republic situation. Like that is a terrible tragedy, right? To end in hyperinflation, and it creates destabilized societies. So in that sense, I agree with the sound money approach, but I also think the sound money approach, when taken to the extreme, is really cruel because look at scenarios, countries like Greece that didn't have control over their own money supply and couldn't do deficit spending when they needed it most. When you have a severe financial crisis or you have an economy that's in a downward spiral, it has those feedback effects. Like, you know, consumers spend less, so businesses start to hurt. So they start to cut jobs and they start to cut investment, and that creates further job losses. And it cycles and cycles and cycles until it just finds this bottom. And sometimes the bottom is at, you know, Great Depression type of levels. You might have an economy down 50 or 60% before it bottoms. And so if you have this hardcore sound money approach, like a gold-backed currency, and you don't have the ability for a federal government to do deficit spending, you can't stop this downward cycle. It's a really cruel thing to imagine a world of just pure sound money, fixed currency supply, no ability for a government to step in.
Flexibility.
Yeah, and backstop it. So I think I have a problem with that. You know, I conceptually have a problem with that.
We just opened up a can of worms.
Well, what do you think? Because I know you are more of a traditional sound money guy. And like I said, I sympathize with that because I don't want the other scenario. I don't want the hyperinflation destabilized society, but I also don't want the situation where you have a depression and there's no bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh man, it's such a complex topic. And at the end of the day, you know, I just focus like what is going to win long term, right? I don't have the answers for how do you keep the most amount of people out of poverty in the short term.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you look at history and you understand that all fiat currencies to date have gone to zero, the US dollar as we know it in its current state is old. I just see the writing on the wall and like, I don't know, man. I don't have the answer other than I want to hold sound money. Yeah, I can't look out for the rest of the world. I can't. I don't know. But I also don't think that just infinitely printing money is going to work. Like it's going to fail at some point. There's going to be a straw that breaks that camel's back, and when it happens, it's going to happen fast.
Too much of anything is a bad thing, right? Like, I don't think we should be just printing money and to infinity, and you know. UBI, maybe it works. Maybe there's a happy medium that we can find. You know, a certain amount of money that in that case that helps keep kind of everybody stable, but doesn't cause inflation or some of the issues that people are worried about with that and MMT. It all kind of feels like a puzzle piece that you have to put together, and we're in this new exploration phase, so to speak, of monetary and fiscal policy. Really.
Yeah, that is kind of the funny thing is like we're in sort of like the middle of the experiment.
We are.
Maybe we're only in like the second or third inning though.
Yeah.
It's early. It's early stages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird to think that your average person goes about their day and they look at dollars and they just accept or euro or yen or whatever. They look at fiat currency and they go, this is money.
Well, we were trained. We were trained to think and believe that way.
To me, now that, you know, the veil has been lifted for everybody that's watching right now, everybody pretty much knows, you know, and I think it's good that this conversation is coming up for more people in the mainstream. But it's just weird that like people accept fiat currency as fact when it really hasn't been around that long in the history of humanity. And to me, it's just, it's so crystal clear that the future of money is something like Bitcoin, right? Like, how can it not be?
Well, because of what I was just saying, like I own Bitcoin, but for slightly different reasons. I own Bitcoin because I agree with you that there's almost certainly going to be devaluation of fiat currency over time, whether it's 2% a year like we've had historically, or it goes much, much higher, which is, I think, possible. I own it because I think it is a sound asset with a scarcity value that should only go up against fiat over time. But what I am a less convinced of is that Bitcoin should be the foundation of fiscal and monetary policy for global governments. And the reason is because of that scenario I said before. If you can't provide a backstop during a economic recession or depression,
What does that look like?
I think that's as big of a problem as, the other problem, which is, having hyperinflation.
Like everything in life, there's probably a middle path here that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and the next question for me is, okay, say all these central bank digital currencies launch, can they survive alongside with Bitcoin? What does that look like?
Well, yeah, because one's decentralized, truly decentralized, and one's centralized, right?
But I'm thinking like 10, 20 years out, like what do these central bank currencies look like?
Yeah.
And do people actually use them and have faith in them? Or are they like, actually, we see that this is really just, markings on a ledger. There is no the proof of work or proof of stake element to securing it. And it's just anybody can do what they want. It's like OneCoin or BitConnect.
I think that's kind of likely because governments still have the militaries to kind of enforce usage, even if the people don't want to. So you could have a situation where, like most of their daily transactions are still done in, digitized USD or digitized euro, credited at the central bank facilities. But, you also have a healthy Bitcoin ecosystem, Ethereum ecosystem, digital currencies, blockchains, assets on blockchains, private chains. When I look forward, at least 10 years into the future, that's kind of how I see it coexisting. But it's hard to think about, what does 50 or 100 years look like because of all the events that could happen and the things that could get weird and change. And
I promise you this, in 50 years, it'll look different, right?
Very different.
Yeah.
I mean, of course it'll look different.
I think-
Everything looks different now.
I think in 5 years, things are going to be dramatically different. The rate of change that we're seeing is picking up. Like the 2013 to 2016 in Bitcoin was really frustrating for me because I felt like the crazy guy with the tinfoil hat on, doing 2 or 3 classes a week, talking about, Wall Street's coming, banks are coming. And like the adoption was just slow. Man, this year, I guess it's 2020 just put things in hyperdrive. Dude.
Yeah.
Like, so many corporations are jumping on the bandwagon now. We saw PayPal. Apparently, I think I read this last night. PayPal had an initial idea of what the demand was going to be for Bitcoin services through PayPal. Apparently, it was 2 or 3x what they thought was going to be the demand. And I think they only released it to maybe 10% of their customers. So that stuff like that is things that a lot of people don't understand how big of a deal that actually is. And when you see stuff like MicroStrategy buying $500 million worth of Bitcoin, now all the CFOs around the world are going,
Shit, should we do this too?
right, are we going to be irresponsible not doing it?
Yeah.
And look, MicroStrategy is in a unique situation. They're a software company. They have all this cash that they don't necessarily need to use right away. The CEO owns 70% of the board seats or whatever. So he can take it that direction. Not every company can immediately do that.
Yeah.
But once that snowball gets going, which it's rolling downhill now, it's only going to get faster.
Yeah.
Like I don't see a high probability scenario where the trend reverses.
Yeah.
Do you guys see something like, unless there's like some massive flaw in the protocol or something weird.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree with you on that. Yeah, I don't see it rolling back the other direction.
yeah.
I
So
wonder how much lost Bitcoin is on ledgers that people couldn't figure out how to access. Random thought. Just random
there's
thought.
some estimates out there, right?
Yeah.
That there's like 10 or 20% of the supply is lost forever or
Oh,
something.
how heartbreaking is that?
For those people who had those wallets, I'm
Yeah.
sure, very heartbreaking.
Yeah. Kevin. Not to call out our producer over there, but he had an issue with Ethereum in the early days that cost some money. We've all had that. It's It's only a matter of time. If you're in crypto long enough, you're going to lose some crypto some way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Someone needs to solve that problem.
Yeah. Cool. So what else should we talk about, guys? I know we've been going for quite a while.
I'm going to check in on some stock stuff real quick and see if...
Cool. Yeah, let's see where we're at with the markets. So
If anyone has questions,
I don't think
pop 'em
anything's
in.
really started moving on the crypto side since we started. We've got equities, which are kind of consolidating. Nothing big there.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a whole lot of change to where we were 2 hours ago here in stocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting day here in stocks, to be honest.
You know what though? This happened a few days before the election in 2016. We saw a rally for a few days going into it. It looks actually, the charts look exactly the same, or not exactly, but pretty darn close. Where we had selling off the week before, and then basically a relief rally into the election, and then the capitulation candlestick where we sold off and then we immediately recovered, and then we went for all-time highs. So it's looking very similar, actually.
That was such a weird night, 2016 election night, because the Trump win was a big surprise that night because the polling pretty much had him
they
as a
all
major.
looked surprised.
Yeah, and when the numbers started to come out from the states that had closed up the polls, it started to swing towards Trump, and the markets were closed, but the overnight futures were trading, the index futures, and the index futures gapped down like 5% that night because of the uncertainty, because it was such a surprise to the market. It gapped down 5%. It looked like the markets were going to open the next morning down big. And then by the morning, the futures had recovered and ended up the next day.
Yeah.
It was a huge swing. And so that kind of shows you too, markets don't always price things in correctly. Even in the short term, it can be pretty volatile as far as markets trying to discount the probabilities and the scenarios and everything. So just keep that in mind tonight, as the elections roll on, like the market could whipsaw, could be very volatile. It could look like one thing tonight and then be totally different tomorrow.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I'm an idiot when it comes to this stuff, so don't listen to what I have to say.
No,
but I think there's a higher probability that we're going to have a contested election, or that it's going to be too close to call today, or even in the next couple of days, maybe.
Yeah.
So in a scenario where that happens, like, forget what the eventual outcome is. In the short term, if there's a lot of uncertainty and there is no clear winner, how do the markets react? Is that a panic scenario? Is that a just flat and choppy scenario? What do you guys think?
I'd expect the markets to be down. If there's a contested election or an unknown result, tomorrow, at least for like a one-day performance, I would think that the market would be down.
Yeah.
Potentially a couple of percent, because markets don't like uncertainty. That's purely it, really.
Yeah.
Markets don't like uncertainty.
There's actually a really big magnet. If we look at the NASDAQ, so right now we're really testing the 11K zone. And like, say there is a gap down, there's actually a pretty high probability, just based on TA, that we could get another 10% sell off to test the 200 period moving average, which is also, by the way, a big emotional price level of 10K and prior resistance turn support. So there's actually a lot of downside risk in that scenario. If there's a gap down, it's just open air down to 10K.
But I think that would be healthy. I mean, looking at the price action, I actually think that would be a healthy move.
So you'd be buying that dip?
I would be buying the dip.
Oh, okay. Sweet.
Actually, someone asked that. You all gonna buy the dip if any of this? I guess if any of this plays out this week.
I'm not going to buy anything blindly. I'll have to assess what the hell's going on at the time. But
yeah, see, that's the good news about like markets, is like, unlike betting, like if you bet on a sports game, you're kind of committed to the outcome.
Yeah.
Where with trading, you can like change your mind on a dime, and you can level up and or dial up and dial down the risk based on your position sizes.
Yeah.
I always say, like, I like to be a reactionary trader instead of an anticipatory trader. Meaning, like, I like to look for the markets to do something and then respond if one of my high probability scenarios plays out, rather than go into guessing, saying, I think this is what's going to happen, right? Like with company earnings or, GDP numbers or an election, anything like that. I'm like, I don't fucking know what's going to happen. Like, there's so many variables. Instead of me trying to guess, why don't we just sit back and wait? And then when something happens that you see a dramatic edge shift in your favor, then you step in and play it.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those scenarios where watching the price action over time will be key too. Like, because we could see, a big bloody sell-off, and that's something you're going to want to not just buy blindly. You don't want to buy a falling or falling knife, right?
Yeah.
But if you see a 10% sell off, and we do react to the 10K level, we do react to the 200-day moving averages, you know, we're at a key support or resistance turn support level, everything's lining up. Yeah, there could be a good dip buy opportunity there if things don't look like it's you know, too bad.
Yeah. And so going back to Bitcoin too, and to your point, Nick, about like that scenario playing out in the stock market, if we did get a rush for the exit in equities, usually, at least so far this year, Bitcoin has kind of followed suit on that initial panic. So like, say we got something like this where, you know, it's like, oh no, equities shit the bed. And then Bitcoin's like, okay, well, I'm going to retreat too. You know, if we did get a sell off like that, let's see what percentage this would be from these highs. So yeah, that's like a, you know, a 10 to 15% sell off. Like that could also turn out to be a dip. So like, for example, instead of me just like buying up here saying, okay, I hope that this election is bullish for Bitcoin, I like to wait for pullbacks or clear breakouts, right? There's really two inflection points that are really good for buying. So buying Bitcoin inflection points is like dips to high probability support zones or breakouts above clear resistance zones, right? So mid-range and kind of choppy, like this stuff, I don't really care about. But if we got something like where it kind of chopped around, put in a 1, 2, 3, 4 breakout pattern above 14K, you know, you'll notice on a lot of my entries, they're like that. It's either entering on major washouts, breakouts, or dips. You know, I try not to execute orders kind of like when you're consolidating up around resistance or you're just chopping around. I really look for those key zones to either break or get sold off into.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, man. A lot to think about. Trav, also, I wanted to pull this up, your tweet about, you know, how stock markets have generally behaved under Democrats and Republican wins.
Yeah. I love this because this is the data. This comes from, you know, the last basically like 80 years of stock market returns or 80 to 100 years of stock market returns in the US as judged by the S&P 500 index. And it breaks it down by the different administrations as well as the control of the Senate and the House by different political parties. So you have the unified Republican, which means the Republicans control the House and the Senate and the presidency. Unified Democrat controls House, Senate, and presidency. And then divided, you know, you've got a Republican president with a divided Senate and House, and then a Democratic president with a divided Senate and House. And then it shows the annual average return for each scenario. And they're all positive. You know, granted, some of these don't have that many years of observations. Like we don't have that many unified Republican situations. And it shows that the returns, longer term average annual returns, are positive in all these scenarios. So this idea that one political party in the US is better for the stock market than the other doesn't really show out in the data.
It doesn't.
The data says, you know what? US companies, US economy, at least historically, has kind of performed well under any political scenario. And I love that because, you know, this is the engine of American commerce and the American economy. It doesn't depend on a Democratic president or a Republican president, even though people seem to think that that is the case. I see stuff on Twitter like the market's going to go down if Biden's president. I don't know that that's obvious. Like, yeah, there might be some sectors that get hit one way or the other, like we've talked about earlier in the show, but it's not clear to me that there's a significant, you know, trend in the market based on who gets elected. It's really not. I mean, Obama and Biden, you know, remember Biden was vice president of this country for 8 years under Obama, who was a Democratic president for 8 years, and the markets were pretty much up every single year during their term. So like the idea that like Trump is better for the markets than Democrats, I don't think is shown out in the data, and vice versa. Like, I don't think you could say, oh, if Trump's reelected, that it's just going to be down from here either. So
I think a lot of the narrative around a Biden presidency being bearish for the market could be also leaning on the tax policy that Biden has kind of put out there, and people thinking, oh well, corporate tax rates are going to go up, where it's really they're not going to go up by much. It looks like from 21% to 28%, and then tax rates on individual families. You know, if you make over 400,000, your rates will go up, and then the capital gains.
Your marginal rates will go up,
right?
which is something that it gets lost in the conversation too.
And then the capital gains tax. There's that narrative going around that's going to cause selling in the stock market because people are going to try to harvest their gains at lower tax rates now. Which I mean, sure, maybe that could happen, but will it have a huge impact on the actual market overall? You think? If say Biden does take it and we do get tax legislation passed that basically creates ordinary income tax rates for capital gains for wealthy individuals, obviously they're swinging size in the markets.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, a couple things here on that. So I think a 6% increase in the corporate tax rate is definitely going to impact corporate profits by 6% of net income or whatever. It's definitely going to create a headwind for corporate profits, but it won't stop profits from growing. A slightly higher tax rate. If you remember, we were already at like a 28 or 30%. Actually, no, we were at
we were at 30.
We were at 35 or 40% federal tax rate for corporations. Now, most corporations don't pay that amount because they have tax offsets and they have credits or ways to shield income.
Net operating losses carrying over, things like that. Yeah.
So most large U.S. companies anyway don't pay the headline rate anyway. But the market did fine under higher rates, 6-8 years ago. They'll do fine under 28% rates. It'll create a slight headwind for profits, but it's not like Armageddon. So I don't think most corporations are really that worried about it. I do think it's weird that the Democrats want to preemptively raise tax rates in an environment where the markets are saying borrow at 0%, borrow at 0.5%, however much you want to spend, we're letting you do it at low rates. I think the Democrats are being kind of stupid in this regard in that they want to raise rates preemptively before they've even tried to spend because, and I get why they want to. They want to make sure that
rich.
They want to, they want to obviously make it, they want to make it look like, that they're trying to shift things back from the rich to the middle class, which is fine. But they're also, I think, worried about a situation where the Republicans then counteract them in the next election, if the Democrats do get elected, where they're like, spending's out of control. We have to control the deficit like they did in Obama's second term. And they fought them at every single turn when they tried to spend money. And so I think the Democrats are trying to be sensitive to that and say, listen, we're going to offset the spending that we want to do with tax increases. That's how we're going to pay for it.
Right.
Even though the reality is under Republicans and Democrats, I mean, Trump's running one of the biggest deficits we've seen ever in the history of the country. Neither party is fiscally responsible. And frankly, the markets are saying it's fine. Don't be fiscally responsible.
Give the people the money so they can spend at all of these corporations.
Yeah. If I were the economic advisors to the Democrats, I'd be like, look, yes, go run with your spending package and say that you're going to help the middle class. All good. Do that. But don't go raise corporate tax rates. There's no need to do that right now. The market wants you to borrow it like barely any interest rates. And if things start to heat up, inflation wise, well, then, the Fed can raise the rates and kind of cool things off a little bit. But don't just go like rate. Essentially what they're doing is they're giving positive impact to the economy from spending, but they want to create a headwind to that positive impact by raising taxes. There's just no need to do that. At least not initially. You can do that if things overheat.
Kind of feels like it cancels.
Yeah,
it
just
cancels each other out.
Yeah.
So Trav and Nikki for president. I can see that, a Travis Nikki ticket.
I don't know. What do you think?
It sounds like a terrible job, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
everyone's wearing Lululemon at the White House.
I don't know anybody sane that would actually want that job. Like, who the hell would actually want to be president?
Not I.
And I don't know. I think, so my fix to this whole situation is we need somebody from our generation to step up and take over because these guys in their late 70s, come on.
We got to get the old people out of office.
Yeah.
You know what's funny?
Rank choice and younger people that actually have skin in the game still.
Boom.
Yeah, and what's funny is I actually think we're starting to be, obviously right now we're as divided as ever, technically, but if you actually get down to the brass tacks and talk to people that have opposing views and stuff, it kind of like we touched on earlier, I think our generation is actually more alike than we're different.
Yeah.
Like we all want a lot of the same things, and that's, you know, the centrist movement, the moderates, you know, that I think that's going to become more popular, people that are kind of right in the
God, I
middle
hope so.
of everything.
Yeah. It was on, was it Brett Weinstein, I think his name was? It was on Joe Rogan, and he came up with some like criteria for like who should be president. And it was like a Yang ticket with one of the admirals. And he was like, you got to be competent, moral, and smart. I think something like that.
I
was
love
like,
that.
Yeah. Oh my God. What if we actually got somebody in there that cared, was smart, and was able to do the job? And then when you look at who
It doesn't want to destroy our economy.
yeah. I don't know, man. I think,
What does the Chris Dunn economic plan look like?
Yeah,
oh, you
everyone's
guys
gonna-
don't want that.
Yeah, it's going to be Bitcoin. Yeah, tell us. What is
Well,
it?
I mean, I'm brutal. I'm like, it's kind of like how Stephen Dubner said, like you don't want economists in political seats because they'll just make numbers-based decisions, and like there is no real heart there.
Shouldn't
like,
we be making more numbers-based decisions?
yeah, I don't know. I just think we need ranked choice, and we need some younger people that are over the bullshit, over the fighting, over the polarization. I mean, that's what our enemies want, right? That's what they want, to sow, hatred amongst each other. And I think our generation is waking up to the fact that, like, look, Facebook is not great.
I don't have COVID, I promise.
No, the allergies are
Facebook
bad.
is not great for the country. You know, we see all the Karens and Chads, ripping each other's faces off over it, and, people living in their little bubbles. And I think hopefully our generation can step up and be like, look, let's get rid of all this stuff. Let's just start to fix these problems that the older generations have put in place.
Yeah, I think I think our generation we see it. We see the ridiculousness of current politics.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well, at least maybe it's, I don't know. I think so. I think it's ridiculous. You can it's like clear as day that the news networks are trying to divide more. Like if you like watch either channel, it's like, oh, it's so obvious what they're doing, and it's working, and it's freaking working. And as Americans, like, we need to try to stop that from continuing to destroy us. Like, we have to somehow find some way to be united.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know.
I think that's a good place to kind of wrap it up. We've covered a lot, and I think we're going on like 2 hours. So let's do a recap.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had a tickle in my throat. It's not COVID.
Yeah, I mean, not a whole lot of crazy movement today so far in the markets. So not much else to talk about there. Guys, if there were any important questions that we missed, feel free to throw them in. But yeah. And thanks for being with us. Again, this was our first live stream. I think it went pretty well.
It's fun.
Yeah, man.
Super fun. I may do a little live stream later this evening on the Stock Geek TV YouTube channel. We'll see. I don't know how I'll be feeling, but maybe could do some.
Give us your play-by-play of the results coming in.
Yeah, we also have some more earnings reports this week, so
Yep.
I'll be on that. We've got companies reporting after the market closes, and could be like volatility, like I said, in the overnight futures markets. So might be some trading opportunities there. Obviously, crypto open 24/7, so you'll have some trading opportunities there as well.
Yeah, I've got my positions in place. I've been building in over the past 6 months, and I don't have like any immediate action to take right now. One thing I am kind of excited about, and this is going to sound weird for anybody who's not a trader, is like how a lot of the DeFi trading assets have just gotten demolished recently. Like, I've been waiting for that because over the past couple of months, it was like just on this runaway tear. And then you had all the rug pulls and all the yams imploding and all that crap. So once that starts to base and accumulate, then I'll start to participate more in that market. But, you guys know, I don't have to be first to the party on a trend. I can be second and have a better risk reward profile. So that's what I've been waiting for in this whole DeFi craze. And most of that shit's going to fail. The stuff that doesn't fail, that ultimately succeeds, I want to be in on. But at good prices.
Yes.
So
Yes. Well, I'm 100% YOLO out of the money Tesla calls. No, I'm just kidding.
what is Tesla doing right now?
Good question.
It's hanging.
It's still
coiling
holding up.
It's
My
holding
God.
up.
This thing is
It's
beast
the
mode.
honey badger.
There is a potential scenario where they get added to the S&P 500 still, which could create
Because
some
of their
buying pressure.
profitable quarter.
Their profits that are
Selling
100% driven by
credits?
regulatory credits. Yeah. Tesla's not that far off from a sustainable profit, assuming, I guess that assumes a lot of things because there is a lot of competition coming their way in EVs. But if the EV market grows enough, there's line of sight on profits for Tesla, assuming they aren't just totally faking their numbers. But right now, the profits have been all driven by regulatory credit sales. I would like to see them get to a point where they can be actually profitable without subsidies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're not too far away. But again, if the gray swan for them is if the company gets added to the S&P 500, which creates a lot of buying pressure from index funds. And that scenario is still out there. It'll probably just remain this potential catalyst out there for the shares. But I'm not crazy about the valuation of Tesla, especially relative to other automakers here. But the thing is resilient. It is the honey badger
Yeah.
of stocks this year.
I kind of don't want them putting it in the ETFs and at this valuation personally, but
Yeah,
I
that
guess
could create
we'll
some
see.
wild volatility.
Well, I mean, it's not like it's going to be, a huge weighting, but it'll be a significant weighting. I mean, their market cap is what? The market cap of Walmart? Or
Yeah, it's 200 plus billion, 300 plus billion.
I thought it was close
Yeah.
to 400
Yeah, you're right. I haven't
Yeah,
checked
it's
it at all.
400 as
400
of today.
Yeah.
billion. I mean, yeah, that's up there,
Yeah.
my friends.
I see a lot of questions coming in about Ripple.
Oh yeah.
So we made a lot of money on Ripple trading it, but the token economics are kind of screwed up. I'm
of the
not going to go
supply,
into
right?
it. Sorry?
Because of the supply.
Yeah, just the supply side is just really funky. And they just, look, when you have a coin that's done this, so we actually, I forget, were we trading this on Polo? We were trading it on one of the older exchanges, but prior to 2017, we had a couple of good trades, and then this was massive. This was when we actually had a breakout trade at 30 cents, and we traded it all the way up to $3. And then if you guys go back, you can see a lot of tweets and stuff and YouTube videos we did about this, where CNBC started shilling Ripple up here to mom and pop investors. As we were closing out our final positions, we turn on, or somebody said like, oh, turn on CNBC. They were doing a class, how to buy Ripple right here. And then they did a class, I think somewhere down here, how to sell Ripple.
Oh my God.
So that's
Typical.
yeah,
Buy
going
the
back to
top.
your joke of CNBC, that's why you don't follow them for trading calls. But, whenever pretend like we're aliens and we don't know anything about Ripple and the supply side and all that stuff. And all we're doing is looking at the chart. Right now, this chart is in the long kiss of death. And what that means is you're making lower highs and lower lows, and you're squeezing into support. So I don't buy charts like this until they start to base and or break out. So sometimes you'll get an accumulation period, but really what I want to look for in a scenario like this is where it can break at least the first strong area of resistance. So an example of that is Ethereum. So Ethereum has had multi-year resistance through $300, and it was basing. I wasn't buying all through here. This is the first sign of potential strength. Now this thing could roll over and do whatever it wants, but at least we were able to take out that $300 price level, and that's the first sign of strength. So I started scaling in here. The second sign of strength is when you get the second 1, 2, 3, 4 breakout pattern above 500. If that happens, I'll add, and I'll have a cost basis like somewhere in the high threes. But that's how I do it, and how I keep it to a point where I don't overthink it, right? So, for anybody that's looking at, I know there's a lot of bag holders in Ripple. For anybody that's looking at just a purely technical chart like this, that's what I look for, is, and until it stops this just slow kiss of death with lower lows and lower highs, instead of trying to guess when that's going to return, the higher probability way to play it is to let it base, let it go through an accumulation period, and then on that first breakout, on the retest of that breakout, is usually where the trend is going to start, if it's going to start at all, right? I don't know. That's just how I trade. Other people have other opinions. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've done pretty damn well in crypto, and I've just seen a lot of the coins that go into this long kiss of death, a lot of them don't survive. So I'm going to leave that at that.
I think it's a great analysis.
Confirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing about crypto is like TA works really well. I know a lot of people like to shit on technical analysis and they say it doesn't work. That's because they use it the wrong way.
Yeah.
They try to use TA to predict what's going to happen. That's not what it's there for. It's basically a guideline and a roadmap where you can base your possibilities and probabilities off of and create plans around. But most people just look at it and go, oh, that pattern didn't work, so TA is irrelevant. When you combine the token economics, the technical analysis, and market sentiment analysis, and you combine those together, you can actually get a really clear picture and get yourself on the right side of these markets.
Hell yeah.
And by the way, one more tangent before we wrap up on that. Everybody that owns crypto is a trader. You know, I know some people like to say like, oh, I don't trade crypto. Yes, you do. If you own crypto or you own stocks, you're a trader. The only thing that is a question is what time frame are you in? Even if you say you're a hodler, if you don't pay attention to price levels that you're buying and selling at, you're just a gambler. But you're still trading. You're just on the wrong side of the market as the professionals. If you're a swing trader, you're a trader. Now, what I would suggest to everybody is don't day trade, right? The higher your frequency of trading and the shorter your time frame, the lower your probability of success is. But if you think you are going to be active in crypto and you can get away with just being reckless and buying at whatever price you want, that's going to increase the probabilities that you're going to buy during euphoria and sell during panics. And every time there's somebody that's like, oh, Chris, all you do is talk about buy low, sell high. Well, yeah, the reason why I do that is because no matter how much I beat that drum, I know that 9 out of 10 people are going to do the opposite of what actually makes money. And it's not because you don't know better. It's because you're a human and you make decisions based on emotions. And the way that you fix that is by understanding how to actually combine all this and get on the right side of the market.
Yeah.
Great points.
Yep. This may be a good time to plug your YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I'm going to plug mine too. Go ahead.
I'm Stock Geek TV on YouTube.
Yeah, we'll link this up too.
Yeah, still relatively, I'm going to say, hey, y'all, in the chat so you can see. It's Stock Geek TV on YouTube. You know, still
Yeah,
pretty,
Nikki, why don't you type in there too?
still pretty young channel. I'm still kind of getting my footing as far as, you know, doing content, creating content, and figuring out, you know, what kind of content people
Well, I
wanna
love what
see.
you're doing with those deep dives. Like, I don't see anybody else on YouTube doing that level of analysis on stocks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've got a couple videos out there with about an hour-long analysis where I did a deep dive, you know, created lots of visuals, financials, and kind of my evaluation of what I think a couple of companies that are undervalued are worth. So yeah, go check that out if you're interested in that kind of thing. I'm going to be doing hopefully a lot more of that type of thing. It takes a while to create that kind of content.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Doing all the research work, doing all the legwork, creating all the visuals, and then actually recording the thing and trying to condense it. You know, an hour sounds like a long time, but that's actually me trying to condense a lot of different pieces of information. So maybe I'll figure out a way to do some like TLDR summaries as well on stocks. But yeah, the idea is, you know, Stock Geek TV is all about just trying to share like really sound fundamental dives on stocks. And
I love also just kind of watching you go through your thought process throughout the slides. There's so much to learn within those deep dives if you really, you know, people that are new to trading stocks or people that have been trading or investing in stocks. Whenever you go through it, like even myself, I'm always like, I catch something new every single time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the content that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
And then on your channel, so for anybody that doesn't know Nikki, she's a CFP, financial planner. And how would you say your specialty is? What's your angle?
Well, certified financial planners are trained across all things finance. So basically, I have a background in anything from cash flow maximization and management to taxes to investing to estate planning and legacy planning, insurance, you know, things like that. So yeah, I kind of I'm in that world, and that's like the crypto world to me. There's still so much to learn, and I'm like, crap, like there's so much to know about in the personal finance space and keep up with in the tax space that it's like I haven't had the time to really dig into a lot of the crypto stuff as much as I'd like to. But basically the channel is to just help educate people on how to better manage their finances and their investing. I'm an investor myself in the stock market. Travis and I are in the community doing stock investing in there. And so that's a part of my identity. So I do have a lot of investing content on my channel too. And
Nick's stock picks, by the way, have been killing it in the past like year
You
or
have
two.
done really well over the past couple of years.
I'm happy with my performance this year.
Very
Yes.
modest way of saying
Hell
it. Stock
yeah.
picks have been crushing it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think sometimes also having a female perspective on things can be helpful. You know, like Pinterest was a crusher. It did super well, and that may not have been on a lot of dudes' radars.
You know, I've heard other investors that I respect also say that like, you know, investing is so male heavy that a lot of times we miss the female angle.
Yeah.
And the female contribution to corporate profits in the economy is fucking massive.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, you've crushed it on what, Lulu, Square, Pinterest. Like you were an early adopter to all those things. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with how things have been going, but obviously, you know, anything can happen. Stay humble.
yeah.
That's
True.
the other thing is like the behavioral finance side of things that I'm really into. Trying to keep everybody level in the community.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that have made life-changing amounts of money in crypto and in stocks, but they just don't understand how taxes like really affect
Well,
their...
that's the thing, and I'm a resource in the skill incubator community for people that have those types of questions because, you know, yes, people come into all kinds of money through investing, but just because you make a lot of money investing doesn't mean you know what you're doing with your money and you're managing it the right way.
Still got to keep it.
Yes.
Not give it away to the government or...
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've done a class about diversification in the skill incubator community before, and I'm about to do a passive investing class for the community. So, you know, I'm just trying to be there for people on the personal finance side and make sure all this money they're making, they do the right things with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've been going for over 2 hours.
Man, flies by.
Hell yeah. Yeah, this was fun. Guys, thank you all so much for being here with us. Yeah, maybe we'll do another live one in the future.
Yeah.
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 Maybe we'll be live streaming from our bunkers later this week.
See, this is what happens when we aren't recording and we're live. Like, this is legit how long we'd be sitting here if we were on the boat or just in general.
And we'd be having these conversations no matter if we were on camera
I know.
or not.
So it's so funny.
Yep.
Man, the boat sounds pretty nice right about now.
It does. How's the weather today?
It's actually super nice.
Sweet.
Uh-oh.
All right, well,
Are we
we're going to go
playing
wake surf. You guys have a great one. Be kind to each other and make wise investing decisions. Reach out to any one of us if we can help you with any part of your investing journey. And yeah, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you know, no matter what happens tonight, like, you know, I think most of us are like I said before, like most of us probably agree on most things, and we want the best for everyone in this country, and this country will move forward. I think we'll be okay no matter what happens, and there might be some shit going on in the interim this week, but I think you know, overall I remain optimistic on this country. I think, like, you know, it has a way of surprising people about how resilient it is. So
yeah.
As Warren Buffett says, never bet against America, ever.
You know, I'm just bullish on humanity overall.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to continue to innovate. We're going to continue to create products and services and companies. And, you know, the brain capital that's in crypto right now is, you know, the hive mind is just really incredible. And I don't know, man, I'm excited to be alive during this time period.
yeah, same. I like what you said earlier, though. Be kind to one another. You know, there's a lot of different ways this thing could go today, but, you know, being kind to your fellow human, I think, is just like the core principle that should guide us no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Go hug somebody that voted for the opposite candidate today. Go
Yeah.
hug somebody.
Well, and I think it goes with the ethos of crypto too, is like borderless, right? Like all this shit is man-made, right?
Yeah.
Social constructs, red versus blue. What team are you on? Well, what if I don't buy into the game at all? What if I try to see past that? Country borders, right? Like today, a lot of people are talking about America because it's an American election, but there's a lot of other people that aren't in America. I'm bullish on humanity as a whole.
Yeah. That's a great
We're
point.
naive, guys. That's what Kirion says.
What did he say?
He said, "Oh, you guys are so naive."
No, I don't think
Ha,
it's
ha, ha.
naive. I think we're very realistic about the state of the world. What I would say is we still are optimistic and we still want to see the best in the world, even though it's not where it needs to be today.
Yeah. Yeah. If you look at like on a multi-decade time frame, humanity is getting better, right? There's a lot of bad things that happen in the short term, but look where the world was 50 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like we're in such a better place today. When you look at the biggest problems of like severe poverty and people dying of malaria and dehydration, like when you look at those metrics, those are all getting better on average. And I think they're going to continue to improve.
Yeah.
Right? Because what happens if you bet against that, right? Like,
Well, betting against it hasn't worked well for.
yeah.
It's sort of like, even if you're right, what's your prize?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
everything
Okay, you're
goes to
sitting here
shit.
with everything crashing
Congrats
and
on being
burning.
right. Like,
Yeah, you were right. Humanity went to shit. We all lose anyway.
Right? It's like whatever.
Yeah, no,
All
I
right.
think you want to root for progress and for the best of things. And, we have the advantage in our community. What I love about it in Skill Incubator community is we do get people from all over the world and lots of different perspectives.
Yeah.
And generally, I see the beauty in human relationships across borders, borderless.
Yeah.
And it's great to be around smart people who care about trying to make the world better and trying to
Agreed.
make wealth-changing or life-changing amounts of money, like you always say.
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to leave it.
All right.
All right.
Thanks everybody for joining
Thanks
us.
for joining us. And reach out if you have any questions. Go to wetalkmoney.com. You can submit a question for the show. Like this up, share it with somebody, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Take care.